Hello, everybody. You are all welcome today in our fourth and last day of our ADR week. We started the first and the second day focusing on the arbitration. We discussed around 7 research on arbitration in the Arab region. In Palestine and the Arab region also. In the third day, yesterday, we talked about mediation. We focused on around 5 or 6 papers that focused on a lot of issues regarding mediation. One of them about the principles of mediation, one of them about how can we be accredited mediators. And we talked in the last session as introduction for today about mediation and peace building. In this day, I'm very honored to have all of you with us today with ACT, the Palestinian non-profit organization focused in East Jerusalem, and the only one that focused on the issue of mediation and the peace building. We are looking forward to learn from all of you today, from all over the world. It's really for us regarding even the situation that we are living in and we are facing in Palestine, the war in Gaza, all what we are facing. But honestly, I'm very happy, I'm very honored that I have a lot of friends from all over the world that we will hear from them today. We will learn a lot from them. And let me start today with our master, with the Godfather, Ken Clark. Ken, I want to say congratulations for your book. We always are learning from you, and you always are surprising us that you are working like your first day working. So thank you for everything you are doing for us. And we are looking forward from you to start this day to talk about anything you want to talk about and give us what you think that we should hear from you, Ken. Please, Ken.
Thank you, Mohammed, for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Thank all of you for being here today to discuss this important topic. And I would like to begin by dedicating certainly my comments, but hopefully all of our comments today to those who are dying, to the children who are dying, to the families that are being torn apart, to all the people who around the world who are suffering from conflict. And I refer now not just to Gaza, but to Sudan, to Ukraine, to countries around the world, but also, and I would really like to focus on this for my comments today, on the realization that there is something similar in all conflicts on all scales. So there is something similar in conflicts between children on a playground, conflicts in families, conflicts in communities, conflicts in organizations, and conflicts in nation states. And I say this because when we face something like the conflicts taking place now in Gaza, they seem to be so massive that there's nothing that we can do about them. And yet, underneath those conflicts are human beings who are responding to each other in classical conflict-creating ways. So if we ask the question, what is mediation? What defines mediation? What makes mediation successful? What makes it fail? The answer, I think, is that mediation is an operation that is performed on a conflict. So it is the nature of conflict that determines the nature of mediation. And while conflict is a sign of dysfunction, while it is a failure of language, a failure of connection, it is also, under the surface, an invitation to remedy or fix it. And it is this invitation that we now have received, an invitation to all of us who are interested in conflict resolution around the world to step forward with ideas about how to resolve them. And these ideas may be unsuccessful. That is not so important. What's important is that we try them, that we have the courage to step into impasse, intransigence, hatred. And that hatred can be momentary, and it can have lasted for generations. But the nature of hatred is what we can then take a look at. So conflict is the problem, and it is also the opening, the gateway, the means by which we discover and invent solutions. It's the first step in a cycle of learning, growth, evolution, and transcendence that does not end until there has been a kind of rebirth, a renewal, a reconciliation. And the possibility of reconciliation is imminent in every conflict. Even if we can't see it, it is present. So when we look at conflicts between members of families, between married couples, between members of communities, different races, different ethnicities, different social classes, different personalities, what we can see beneath the surface is that while these conflicts feel fixed and unmovable always to everyone who's in them, they feel as though they have been nailed to the floor. But the nails are simply stories of demonization. They are ways in which we create enemies of each other. And these stories keep us stuck. But the floor is a complex mixture of emotions and attitudes and assumptions and intentions, each one of which can be altered, each one of which is vulnerable, each one of which is evolving. And what we discover in the course of trying to mediate disputes on all scales is that even when there appears to be no possibility of resolution at all, and that people are completely and totally stuck and there is nothing we can do about it, even in those circumstances, beneath the surface, there is a desire for resolution, a human desire on the part of people who are stuck to communicate with one another. So mediation is the means by which we discover that nothing is stuck, that everything can be moved. Mediation is the unifying principle. It's the celebration of diversity because it allows us to transform our differences into communications, into dialogues. Conflict creates the abyss. Mediation spans it. So mediation is the precise point where in Chinese culture, yin meets and dissolves into yang. Mediation, in this sense, is the heart of heartlessness. It's the place where light emerges from darkness. It's the unspoken request for kindness that lies beneath every cruelty. And it is the discovery of the other within the self. and the self within the other. It is, if you will, the sacred at the heart of the profane. It is patience and openness and caring in the presence of suffering. It is, in short, the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. It's the way in and it's the way out. And for this reason, we need to celebrate those mediators around the world, and several of them are on this call. Geoffrey Corey, who is here from Ireland, who has personally dedicated great parts of his life to ending the violence between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. Push Gupta, who is on this call, who is doing wonderful work in India. And there are many others who are dedicating their lives to try to make sure that the solution of killing one another, the solution of war, the solution of violence is one that we recognize is simply wasteful. It's destructive of human possibility. And so what mediation represents is an effort to rescue not just individual human beings, but all of us together from all of the misery that we have experienced, all the trauma and the suffering that we experience in the course of conflict. We are here to rekindle the light. We are here to venture into darkness every day and do what we can to help people recognize that conflicts are not inevitable. Now, how exactly do we do this? I think that we have multiple tasks in front of us. The first is to try to understand why we need to create an enemy. What is this process? Why do we need an enemy? What does having an enemy do for us? What is the methodology by which we reduce people to stereotypes? And how do we overcome that stereotyping process? How do we deal with fear, with grief, with the mountains of grief that right now separate people in the Middle East and in other countries as well, the mountains of guilt, the mountains of hatred? How do we begin to pull these apart? And I think one of the answers is stone by stone. The rubble of Gaza is the rubble that we create in our own lives, the burned buildings, the bombed structures of our relationships with one another. And so what we need to do in the first place is to try to understand more closely and accurately how exactly this takes place. And when we discover that, what we are also discovering is what I am trying to talk about in this new book that Mohammed referred to, called The Magic in Mediation. We discover that there is magic in this process. And that magic consists of the idea that it is possible for even people who are the most stuck of all to suddenly, inexplicably, change course and turn in a different direction. Geoffrey Corey has seen this in Ireland, and we have seen it on a personal scale, all of those of us who have done mediations. I have now been doing this for over 40 years, and I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of disputes. And I can tell you that in every single one of them, both people who are stuck, both people who are being hateful towards each other, both people who are even involved in violence towards each other, want it to be over in their heart of hearts. So how do we open people's hearts? How do we help them see the other person who they have constructed as evil, as a brother, as a sister, as a member of their own family? How exactly do we do this? Well, it turns out that in ordinary mediations, we discover how to do it. I have done mediation sessions and dialogues between people who have hated each other for generations, people who cannot stand to be in the same room with each other, people who have been shooting at each other and at war with each other. And I can tell you that while this work is not easy, and while it doesn't always succeed, the reason it succeeds at all is what needs to preoccupy us. So we need to bring a kind of optimism to our work. And this optimism requires us not only to celebrate the even failed efforts that we have brought to conflict resolution. It needs to, in addition to this, find the places where there is not just a single truth, but multiple, complex, overlapping, even contradictory truths. And our goal is not simply to choose between these digital representations, either or, but to reveal the symmetries, the synergies, the insights that emerge from combining them in creative ways. So here is a part of what I have realized in conflict resolution over a period of many decades. First, everything large and important and profound and sacred is contained in miniature, holographically, in something that is small and meaningless and profane. And within those tiny places, it becomes possible for us to alter the ways in which people judge each other and themselves, to assist them in entering into difficult and dangerous conversations by showing up, by being as present as possible, by being ready for anything at every moment, as though our lives were about to change as a result of what we are about to hear. So what I want to do is to welcome you to a fundamental shift in the way that we understand conflict, the way that we understand violence, to see it not as monolithic, but as cracked. And as the famous poet Rumi said, out of these cracks becomes light. And as Leonard Cohen, the musician, wrote, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That crack is conflict. And mediation is the light that helps people, or at least it's the way into the light that people can then begin to transform into collaborative, familial relations with one another. So that is my hope, and it is what I would like to suggest as a challenge to everyone here. It's now quite early where I am in California right now, so I'm afraid I will not be able to be with you right now. I will try to join you a little bit later. But I want to wish you absolutely wonderful conflicts that will challenge you, conflicts that will draw out your own creative ideas and instincts, and conflicts that will help us transform this suffering world into one in which there is greater caring and understanding and connection between all of us. Thank you very much, Mohammed. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you. I really appreciate it from you also. It's يعني your sleep time and you are with us. So really I appreciate it. Thank you all the time. We are honored that we have you always. We don't want to stop hearing you, but today you open it and you make it happen also. You are supporting us all the time. So we want to thank you also for being with us. We really appreciate it. And I want now to introduce my colleague Faten. Faten, she's from Tunisia. And by the way, a lot of participants with us today is not only from Palestine, they are from all over the Arab world, from Lebanon, from Jordan, from Egypt, from the Gulf area, from Yemen, from Iraq, from everywhere. And we have a lot of partners from all over the world who believe in mediation and peace building. Faten, I will leave introducing Nita, the second speaker, for you, please.
مرحبا بكم جميعا، وسعيدة أن أكون ضمنكم ضمن هذا اليوم الاختتامي في حوار مفتوح مع مؤسسة أكت في ملتقى الوسائل البديلة الذي الحمد لله نختم به سنة 2023. وكل عام وأنتم بخير. سعيدة أن أكون ضمن هذا الجمع المتنوع والرفيع المستوى من الوسطاء عبر العالم. محادثتنا الثانية ستكون نيتا يونورانج، مختصة في عدة مجالات، من ذلك الوساطة والتخطيط، بناء المهارات الدبلوماسية، المفاوضات الحكومية الدولية في الأمم المتحدة والكومن لو. شاركت في الأمم المتحدة في الاشتباكات في رواندا والبوسنة وكوسوفو وسيرا وأثيوبيا وإريتريا ودارفور والصحراء الغربية، ومع الكومن في الصراع. طبعا من ذوي الخبرات السياسية والتحليل وتطوير الاستراتيجيات في الوساطة، وخاصة قضايا السلام والأمن الدوليين، قادرة على تقديم الاستشارات السياسية والاستراتيجية السليمة بشأن منع النزاعات والوساطة والمساعي الحميدة، وتقديم طبعا التوجيه التشغيلي لتعزيز أنشطة حل النزاعات الدولية. وما يعني الجديد في يعني تقديم ما يمكن أن نقوله فيما يتعلق بنيتا، أنها حصلت للتو على درجة الدكتوراه، وموضوع رسالة الدكتوراه هو التوسط في وقف إطلاق النار الدائم واتفاقية السلام، نهج موازنة القوى لتحقيق المتانة. شكرا لقبولك الدعوة، ولك الكلمة دكتورة نيتا، تفضلي.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Well, it's I'm speaking from Malaysia. It's 10:30 in the evening, so I hope that I will speak with a bit of clarity without falling asleep on you. First off, let me just say thank you to Mohammed and Fatin and ACT for having me here. It's a privilege to speak to a group of mediators who are working day in, day out to, in your own way, to bring peace and conflict resolution to people around you. It's wonderful at a time of war and violence around the world that there are so many people, regardless in which capacity, that are still coming together to bring people together to build peace between warring parties, be it in a small way, a big way, or an international way. I want to thank Ken Cloak, the speaker ahead of me, for bringing us back to the tenets of mediation and for the wonderful work that he does around the world. I'd like to call myself, in contrast to Ken, a realistic optimist. And in this sense, I'd say that I use the word realism to say that as much as I would like to see peace around the world, I still feel that one has to take stock of what is real and try to build it in a realistic step-by-step way. And in that sense, I just give you two bits about my own life. Having spent over 25 years in international organizations in war-torn countries, I've basically wanted to understand why it is that peacemaking is so difficult and why ceasefires are such a challenge to mediate and difficult to achieve, and more importantly, difficult to remain stable. So in that sense, it inspired me to go into doing a PhD at a very late stage in my life to simply find answers to this question. So let me speak a little bit today about what I have found in seeking answers to this question, and maybe that can be brought back to a little bit of what is going on around the world today in the warring context that we see, which are horrendous to watch in every way. Ceasefires are prevalent in every war to peace transition. And despite their prevalent presence in these processes, mediated ceasefires in particular are very difficult they struggle to end violence in a durable way. Now, practitioners and academics have tried to explain the situation for why mediated ceasefires, and more broadly, why peace processes and peace agreements break down. Now, you can categorize their answers into four categories. The prevailing argument rests largely in four camps. First, it is because they argue that it is the conflict. It is very difficult. It might be self-determination. Some argue it's ethnic, and therefore that makes it difficult, etc. So they place the blame in the core issues of the conflict. The second group will place the answer in the negotiation process, saying that it was not designed properly, etc. And the third, in terms of the quality of the agreement. Here you see the more legalistic approach to the agreements and saying that they are not going to be kept because of the contents of the agreement. And the last aspect of it is on implementation. This group of this explanation basically says that there was not enough resources, there is not enough commitment from the parties, there's not enough commitment from the guarantors, etc. So these are the four main categories of explanations as to why ceasefires and peace agreements fall down. These arguments, all of them, you could say, bear some truth, but none of them provide an overarching answer to why it is that these agreements and processes fall apart. So my research actually put forward a theory that in most conflicts, the power asymmetry between the parties that characterize a lot of these conflicts encourage governments to use violence to avoid negotiations, while armed groups use violence to push for negotiations. So it's quite a contradictory situation. And in this situation, you find that peacemakers are struggling to find a way to actually end the violence, because one party is using violence to avoid negotiations, the other party is using violence precisely to get to the negotiating table. So this challenge makes it that, it really begs the question, how do peacemakers mediate a durable ceasefire and end the violence in a permanent way? So what I put forward and what my research was about is analyzing the power differential between the parties. And I argued that mediators, regardless of what they call themselves, whether they call themselves facilitators, peacemakers, mediators, communicators, what have you, if you really break down some of the tactics that they use, you will be able to see that they are actually taking action to balance the power between both sides. So if you look at the process that they design, little by little, you can see that the advancement in a peace process happens when mediators by their actions, by their tactics, have balanced power between both sides. So if you take a peace process and divide it up into 3 or 4 stages, the stage of pre-negotiation, you will find that pre-negotiation, parties come to the table and agree to a peace process when the balance of power is getting to be more balanced, more on par. And this can be done either because they have achieved balance on their own, or because the peacemaker has helped them achieve that balance. And here, when I use the word power, I don't mean simply the issue of power militarily. I mean power in the broadest sense of the words, from interpersonal power to international power. So on the diplomatic side, economic side, military side, information side, all of these can constitute power. And how you balance power can actually bring parties to the table. During a peace process, the design of a peace process as well, I found in my research, that design of a peace process, the moment, in a mediation process, the balance was disrupted, parties walked out of a process because they could see that they were not protected, they were not anymore protected. Once the balance dropped from a pre-negotiation and into a negotiation phase, parties would walk out of a peace process. Whereas when they balanced the process, used the tactics of format, agenda, venue, etc., to balance power, parties remained in the process. And within the agreement and implementation, again, the same was true. So in a lot of occasions, you will find that in a peace process, in an agreement, there's always a contest for when do we disarm the parties? How do we disarm the parties? Whereas the non-state actor will simply say, we're not disarming until we achieve our political goals. So there's always this question of when and how to disarm, and when and how political commitments will be made. Now, what I found in my research, again, is very interesting in the sense that the mediators who balanced the situation in a post-agreement context really were able to keep the process going and keep the commitment of the parties. So a lot of mediators use their own presence to secure the agreements. And in this sense, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean big peacekeeping operations, etc. It can also mean scrutiny using the media, video, etc., to make sure that the party that has committed itself to political agreements implements the agreements in order to achieve the military aspects of the agreement. So both sides have to be balanced in a peace process, because if you look at the international context, or even a state, when it's not in balance, that is sometimes where the conflict occurs. And when the balance is restored, you can actually find that parties are better able to communicate and to be able to respect each other when you have that balance. Now, some of my co-mediators come at this problem from a psychological perspective. I choose to come at it from a power perspective, although I recognize that power also affects the psychology of the situation. So in this sense, we can also analyze power from a psychological perspective. Now, one of the interesting things that I have found in my research, and also from looking at peace processes around the world, is that there are 2 moments in which parties actually agree to come together to negotiate. The first moment is usually very quickly after violence has started. This is when parties know exactly where their power is, whether it is balanced or whether there's an acute asymmetry, and they recognize that they cannot change this asymmetry. And if they don't negotiate now, they're going to suffer further. The next instance comes only after much violence, but it comes when there is both power symmetry. And here it's where the academics call there is ripeness and there is a hurting stalemate. So both sides find that they cannot win. They might not lose, but they cannot win in a situation. And the impetus to go for a mediated or negotiated ceasefire and peace agreement happens when there is a fear from both sides that they might in fact lose. So there must be a potential that both sides can actually lose. And in that context, you would come to that situation where they're more willing to accept a mediation process to end the violence. Now, there's a lot written about the value of ceasefires at the beginning of a process, or at the end of a process. And my research actually finds that one has to look at ceasefires as to what is it going to contribute to the peace process strategically. If you're looking for a humanitarian ceasefire, then there's a specific objective, and that objective is to provide humanitarian relief. Now that you cannot...
نعتذر لمحادثتنا، فقط أريد التذكير بأننا يعني لكل متحدث 10 دقائق.
I see. Okay, let me just conclude really quickly that ceasefires have particular purposes. Like I said, humanitarian. The second one might be just to start a peace process. And the third one is to conclude a peace agreement and to say that you have achieved a political agreement and you choose to end the war. So when one wants to mediate a ceasefire, we have to look at what purpose we are choosing to have that ceasefire and not burden the ceasefire with more objectives than they are intended for. And that's where the ceasefire can actually fail as well. Let me end there, and perhaps we take questions from the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita, for this very important session. We learned a lot from it. Actually, we will keep it, the discussions later on, because we have a lot of speakers. Let me now speak in Arabic. وأرحب بالدكتورة لمياء الأرياني من اليمن. دكتورة لمياء، احنا يعني أنا وياها زملاء بالشبكة العربية للمسامحة والمصالحة، وهي فاعلة وناشطة أكاديمية واجتماعية في قضايا بناء السلام، وستحدثنا عن تجربتها خلال الحرب باليمن. دكتورة لمياء، تفضلي. دكتورة لمياء معنا؟
مساء الخير. أنا بداية أحب أن أشكر مؤسسة أكت على استضافتي للحديث اليوم في هذه الفعالية الهامة. سوف أتحدث عن تجربتي الشخصية في الحرب اليمنية التي جعلت من اليمن واحدة من أسوأ الكوارث الإنسانية في العالم. قبل الحرب، قبل 2015، أنا كنت واحدة من القيادات النسائية في اليمن، حيث عملت كوكيلة وزارة لمدة 5 سنوات. ثم تم تعييني الأمين العام للمجلس العدل للأمومة والطفولة، بمعنى أنني كنت في موقع صنع قرار ورسم سياسات. عندما قامت الحرب كنت من الناس القلة الذين كان لديهم الفرصة للخروج من اليمن وهروبا من الحرب، وكنت أعتقد أن الموضوع لن يتعدى شهر. ولكن بعد مرور أكثر من شهر وجدت أن الحرب قد تطول، وبقائي في الغربة لا يقل مرارة وصعوبة إن لم يكن أكثر من عودتي إلى اليمن وتحمل كل ما يتحمل أبناء بلدي من المعاناة ومن الصعاب من هذه الحرب. فكانت العودة إلى صنعاء، وعندما عدت وجدت أنه ليس من الحكمة أن أظل في مكانتي في عملي الحكومي حتى لا أجير إلى هذا الطرف أو ذاك، وشعرت بأن انضمامي إلى المجتمع المدني سيمنحني ربما فضاء أوسع ومساحة أكبر لخدمة أبناء البلد بالدرجة الأساسية. فانتقلت من صانعة قرار إلى مقدمة خدمة، وأنشأت منظمة مدرسة السلام في عام 2017 عملنا في هذه المنظمة ضمن العلاقة الترابطية الثلاثية، السلام، بناء السلام والتنمية والاستجابة الإنسانية. أنا بشكل شخصي ومنظمتي كذلك أصبحنا أعضاء مؤسسين لكثير من الكيانات والائتلافات التي تعمل في مجال بناء السلام، سواء كان على المستوى الوطني أو على المستوى العربي أو على المستوى العالمي. بحكم عملي السابق وربما مكانتي الاجتماعية والسياسية داخل البلد، كان من السهل علي أن أقوم بدور في عملية تقريب وجهات النظر بين أطراف الصراع، بين هذا الطرف، بين الحكومة الشرعية وبين أنصار الله. فكانت لي أدوار وللمنظمة أدوار في هذا الجانب، بالإضافة إلى أننا عملنا على العمل على تعزيز مشاركة الشباب والنساء في الأمن والسلم المجتمعي. تمكنا أن نقوم بتأهيل وتدريب عدد كبير جدا من النساء والفتيات وكذلك الشباب في موضوع بناء السلام، في التفاوض، في الوساطة، وشكلنا العديد من المبادرات المجتمعية التي تسعى إلى هذا الموضوع، وربما يعني أوجدنا كذلك أدلة تدريبية في هذا الجانب. واستطاعت هذه المبادرات في محافظات عدة داخل اليمن أن تقوم بعمل الوساطة في مجالات مختلفة، سواء كان في تبادل الأسرى والمعتقلين أو في موضوع حل النزاعات المجتمعية. تمكنوا هؤلاء الشباب والنسوة من حل كثير من الإشكاليات والنزاعات الموجودة على المستوى المحلي. كنت دائما أؤمن بأنه إذا كانت الحرب هي من صناعة الرجال، فإن الحل لا يمكن أن يكون إلا بمشاركة النساء، لأن النساء في اليمن هن الأكثر تضرراً من هذه الحرب، وهن لا حول لهن ولا قوة، لم يساهمن في صناعة هذه الحرب. كذلك حرصنا أنه السلام لابد أن يكون هناك استقرار، والسلام لا يكون بمفرده إن لم يكن هناك تنمية وإن لم يكن هناك استجابة إنسانية كذلك. فسعينا إلى تأهيل النساء والشباب، خاصة النساء النازحات اللواتي فقدن عوائلهن والمعيلات لأسرهن. تمكنا من تدريبهن على مهن مدرة للدخل في مجالات متعددة. ربما أتوقع أن احنا قمنا بتدريب أكثر من 600 امرأة وأكثر من 300 شاب في مهن مدرة للدخل مختلفة، وأعطيناهم الحقائب المهنية وفتحنا حاضنات، وهذا ساهم بشكل كبير جدا إلى تغيير مستوى الحياة التي كانوا يعيشوها. خففنا من حالة العنف الذي كان يمارس ضد النساء. تمكنا كذلك بسبب تحسن أوضاعهن الاقتصادية إلى التخفيف من ظاهرة زواج الصغيرات الذي انتشر بكثرة أثناء الحرب. تمكنا كذلك من التخفيف من ظاهرة أطفال الشوارع التي انتشرت أيضا كذلك بسبب الحرب والفقر. فكان لنا في منظمة مدرسة السلام دور كبير جدا في إيجاد السلم المجتمعي وفي تحقيق الاستقرار ولو على الأقل على المستوى المجتمعي المحلي. كنا أعضاء في بعض الائتلافات المحلية والعربية والعالمية. كنت أنا أيضا عضوة في ولا زلت في المجموعة الدولية للمرأة والسلام ومقرها كوريا الجنوبية، وشرفت بأن تم تعييني أو منحي لقب سفيرة السلام لجهود التي بذلتها خلال ال7 سنوات الماضية، والتي كنا فيها نسعى دائما إلى أن نجعل من اليمن ولو نحاول أن نستعيد المسمى باليمن السعيد والذي لم يعد سعيد. فحاولنا أن نرسم الابتسامة على وجوه الناس، خاصة الذين تضرروا كثيرا من هذه الحرب. أنا أشعر أنه دوري أثناء فترة الحرب أهم بكثير من دوري ما قبل الحرب في مواقع صنع القرار. مهم جدا أن نسعى إلى حل النزاعات، أن نسعى إلى عمل الوساطة وإلى التفاوض. سعينا كذلك إلى إشراك النساء في طاولة المفاوضات، لأنه أي اتفاقية سلام قادمة إذا لم تستوعب احتياجات النساء واحتياجات الشباب والمجتمع المدني فستكون اتفاقية لسلام من هش لن يستمر طويلا. ونجحنا كثيرا في الوصول إلى لائحة أو قائمة في الاستشارية مكتب المبعوث الأممي في اليمن، وقدمنا كثير من الرؤى وأكثر من 21 ورقة سياسات عامة في مختلف المجالات المعنية بقضايا السلام في اليمن، وتم الأخذ بكثير من التوصيات التي وردت في هذه الدراسات التي قدمناها. بعد مرور هذه السنوات أشعر بالفخر بأنني اتخذت القرار الصحيح بالعودة، وبأنني اتخذت القرار الصحيح بأن أقف إلى جانب بلادي في هذه المحنة التي تمر بها، وأدعو من الله سبحانه وتعالى ونحن على مشارف اتفاق بين أطراف النزاع أن نصل فعلا إلى السلام، وأن نبدأ في بناء اليمن الجديد، اليمن المستقر، اليمن السعيد. شكرا جزيلا لكم.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذة لمياء. يعني هذه التجربة تجربة جديرة بأنها تسمع وأن تعمم أيضا. تحديدا التجارب الشخصية هي تجارب مهمة خلال النزاعات، خلال الحروب ومراحل ما بعد النزاع والحروب. كل التقدير وكل الاحترام. بدعو زميلتي فاتن أيضا للترحيب بصديقنا العزيز ألان بروس. فاتن.
مرحبا بروفيسور دكتور ألان بروس. طبعا الدكتور ألان بروس هو رئيس التنفيذي لشركة Universal Learning System، والتي ترتكز على البحث والتدريب والتقييم في مجال التعلم الشامل. لك الكلمة دكتور، تفضل. دكتور بروس.
ألان.
You are muted. Can you please open your phone, your mic, please? بالنسبة لفريق التقني، هل ممكن تدخل لفتح الميكروفون تبع الأستاذ الدكتور ألان بريديس؟
Can you hear me now?
هو احنا يعني
Yes.
تمام. مرحبا دكتور، تفضل. نأسف على هذا الإشكال التقني.
That's all right. I was getting a little bit scared because it said the host would not allow me to unmute. So I'm very grateful that you could. Good afternoon to everybody. I am very pleased and honored to be with you today and to make my small contribution on work that we have done around mediation in conflict situations. I am particularly interested I have been working in Palestine for the last 5 years with various universities there, and it gives me great pleasure to be at least virtually present with you in Palestine, particularly at this appalling time, and you are very much in our thoughts. I'm also very grateful to Mohammed and to ACT for the opportunity to contribute to you here today. And I am very grateful to a former student of mine, Jerry O'Sullivan, who had actually put us in contact. So it's lovely to see how these things can actually come around in time. I want to talk about a particular program in which we have been involved in Ireland called Conflicts of Interest. And it is one example of the personal voyage I think all of us who work in mediation or work in the area of conflict resolution have been on. And to set that in context, I have worked in other situations in other places, both as an academic and as a researcher, but also as a participant in the nature of struggle. And that comes from a background. And I think my background perhaps is slightly relevant for this. I am Irish, and our organization, ULS, is an Irish organization. But like many Irish people, my parents were immigrants, and I was brought up in the United States. And at a very young age, growing up in California, I became aware of various things around me that gave me cause for great concern. First of all, I was surrounded by an ocean of racism. It was profound, it was endemic, and it touched everything. was also surrounded by the notion of war and military language. The war that I grew up with, and there seems to have been continuous wars, was the war in Vietnam. And these things produced many stresses for me. Who was I? What was my identity? Did I identify with this, or did I identify with the oppressed? And this was to echo, I think, throughout my life, both in terms of my academic career and in terms of my professional and personal life. I came to Ireland when I was 19, 20 years old, thinking probably I was getting away from these oceans of racism and violence. And I arrived in Ireland at a time when, yes, there was a war on, the beginnings of a war that was to last 30 years. And in the middle of that, from my point of view, was the question of a struggle around civil rights, around identity, and with a divided community. My own background, for what it's worth, is from an Irish Protestant background. And I realized that that meant very different things in California than it certainly did in Ireland. But my academic work concentrated on migration and on colonialism. This is the area where I worked in over my life and career. And I've been very focused on the issues around that. Ireland is probably the oldest colony. I will come back to that when I talk about our own program, but also the colonial struggles that shaped my understanding of the world I grew up in were not just around Vietnam, but also particularly, and I think it's quite relevant now, around Algeria. Now, as life has gone on and my work has started, I have worked primarily with the government agencies, well, for a number of years in Ireland, on rehabilitation and disability. And this brought me face to face with the causes of disability, particularly in war or post-war situations. So in 1995, I was assigned to work in Bosnia, dealing with the victims of the horrendous campaigns of ethnic cleansing that had occurred during the war there. And this was my first time encountering the need for formal mediation and conflict resolution processes. Subsequently, I was to develop programs and work on this in Kosovo, in Cyprus, in Euskadi, and various other conflict zones around the world. But it came home to roost in the early 2000s with the development of our program called Conflicts of Interest in Ireland. This program was funded by the European Union under the only program the European Union has ever designed just for one country, called Peace. And under the Peace program, there was Peace 1, 2, 3, and I think even 4. We were funded to set up a program that had been brought to our attention by ex-prisoners. This is what makes the program different. These were people who had been imprisoned. Now, this is where terminology becomes important. Depending on your point of view, they were terrorists, or from other points of view, they were freedom fighters. But one way or the other, they had been locked in prisons. They had been labeled as criminals. They vehemently rejected this label. They saw themselves struggling against oppression and against occupation. And they came out of prison with new insights and new ideas about who they were, but what they wanted to do, and all unanimously would probably be against violence because they had had time to reflect on the futility of this. On the outside of this process, and the ex-prisoner perspective, the ex-combatant perspective in civil conflict like Ireland is extremely important. But on the outside was the peace process, which was occurring. Internally, there was the question, and this was just touched on by our previous speaker, Nita, was the question of disarmament and how was that to proceed. And within that, our own particular program started off. And it started off by looking at the target groups we had. We had many ex-combatants who came from a Republican background. These were people who had supported the various nationalist organizations struggling or opposing British rule in Ireland and fighting for the United Ireland, or at least a transformed Ireland. On the other side, we had ex-combatants coming out representing the loyalist community and those of a unionist persuasion who had taken up weapons, and they were struggling to maintain their position as part of the United Kingdom. These two communities could not be further apart. They had fought each other, they had encountered each other. To put it mildly, the hostility was profound and the suspicion was total. However, they had shared the experience of imprisonment. They shared the experience of rejecting the label of simply being criminals. And one or two leaders began to realize that they had a perspective to bring to the post-war environment that was critical. And in prison, a couple of things happened. Particularly among the Republican prisoners, there was a focus and a concentration on education, on learning. At one point, the highest concentration in the world of master's and PhD students from the Open University was in one prison outside Belfast, Long Cashew, the Maze prison. This does not apply to the same extent in the loyalist community, but these ex-combatants were all shaped by a desire to see something improve, something different in the world ahead. Our program, therefore, began to try and bring these groups together, initiated by them, facilitated by us, and structured by us. And we combined it with encounters, sometimes which were highly sensitive, because there was a high degree of sensitivity required. They could be called traitors by their own side and still labeled by various civil society elements as being terrorists or just violent people. We had security issues, we had public stigma, but we had the initial context that grew and developed. What was in common was that people realized violence ultimately was going nowhere. Some form of coexistence was required. And therefore we realized that there were other dimensions around pain, around the impact of violence and killing, and much of the killing had been quite appalling and shocking. Questions of retribution, even of revenge, sat side by side with issues around forgiveness and shame and guilt. And within that, we began to structure a series of workshops for initial contact, for development, for reflection. Initially, as was referred to, I think, there in separate rooms, but subsequently in the same room. And a training program. What did these people have in common? And from our point of view, they had history. So we taught history. And we tried to explore identity and to let people explore it in peace and to share their sense of who they were, by contrast with the sense of how other people saw themselves as well. This produced impressive results. I don't have the time to talk about it here, but I can say that it produced a sea change in communities, particularly in loyalist communities. We found a hunger, a desperation for engagement, for understanding, leading up to the point where many loyalist ex-combatants would say to us, if we had been in their shoes, we would have done the same thing. Those of you who know Irish history knows what a leap that is. But it also meant that we began to get interest from other people. Other people, what are you doing? How is this working so effectively? Real relationships were being formed by people who even began to like each other, began to share things and stories and events, not in a facile or superficial way, but in a real way of engagement. And we had interest from policing services, from other people from civil society who wanted to do the same thing. And eventually we had joint programs. We had provided, therefore, a meeting point, a safe space, and a forum to explore something which was neutral but shared. And within that, to have voices recognized and to inch towards a slightly better understanding. When the really critical issues around disarmament and disarming came up, these ex-combatants were to take a leading role in advocating this against some of the maybe more intransigent elements on the outside of the process, those who use politics to achieve other ends. I'm not saying we achieved everything. We certainly did play, however, a part in the transformation of the experience of Northern Ireland and in setting the scene for those most directly impacted by the violence because of their imprisonment and because of their ability to fight. They had credibility within their own communities, and they were able to set a standard of how it was possible to move forward. I think the lessons for me from this was that if we can provide those initial points of contact and allow people to go beyond the slogans and go into real meaningful contact, we can make progress. There always is that option. Subsequently, I was to spend 3 years working in the Basque Country, the University of the Basque Country, working with communities there where, again, the intransigence of both the Spanish and French states made it much more difficult. But when ex-prisoners were able to contact and to engage, and even engage with the victims of the violence they had initiated, real progress could be made. There were significant challenges in the work we did. We realized the importance of honest openness, of people being able not to tell lies, but to really engage with each other. We found that the question of empathy became critical to how we shaped this discourse and provided for the future. We also realized the huge weight of guilt and remorse among many ex-combatants as they confronted this. We were not confessors, we were mediators. How they dealt with that becomes the stuff of politics. But I think this is one small contribution from one small part of the world, and given the experiences we're going through at the moment in Palestine, maybe something that might be of use. I'll leave my comments there, and maybe if there are questions, I'd be more than happy to explore or develop in depth later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. We learned
شكرا
a lot.
لك دكتور ألان على هذه الجولة في رحاب الوساطة، وساطة السلام عبر العالم، وعلى هذه التجارب التي بسطتها. طبعا سنعود لكم فيما بعد فيما يتعلق بالأسئلة. تفضل أستاذ محمد.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا لألان كمان. رح ارحب هلا ببوش اب جوبتا. بوش اب هي ممثله للحكومه الهنديه بوزاره البيئه والغابات، وهي وسيطه لدى المحكمه العليا في الهند. هي وسيطه معتمده لدى المحكمه العليا في دلهي ومحكمه منطقه دلهي بالهند، وبشكل اكثر تحديدا في القضايا الخلافات الأسرية والزوجية. عندها خبرة 11 سنة في الوساطة وأكثر من 600 قضية في مختلف المحاكم في نيودلهي، وهي مدربة في مجال الوساطة والتوفيق. I would like to sorry for the late because your time was before 10 minutes, around 15 minutes. We will do our best to keep every speech in around 10 minutes to be well organized. And I would like also to apologize because our room is the maximum of it is 100, and we passed the 100, and part of some of the speakers are sending me messages on WhatsApp asking why they cannot enter, so we'll do our best to make them in with us. Please push up. You're with us, right?
Yeah. So
Please.
good evening, good afternoon, and namaste to everyone from India. And my special thanks to my dear friend and colleague Mohammed Haider for inviting me to this galaxy of stars virtual dais, which otherwise I could not have thought of visiting. But I'm really extremely grateful to you for this invitation, and especially to share a platform virtual dais with our legend, Mr. Kenneth Clark. We always look upon an opportunity where we can share or listen to Sir, and it was great learning. But I'm thankful to my previous speaker, Dr. Neeta, and Mr. Alan Bruce also. Actually, in fact, they have already shared what's there in my heart, and I would like to, just add few to what Mr. Alan has highlighted. See, basically, today we all have assembled as mediators and peace builders. And we would like to hear from everyone their perspective about their role as mediators in peace building. But my query and concern before I speak on anything is, do we really understand what is peace building? And what is peace building is essentially dependent upon our understanding as to what is peace. Peace, to my knowledge and in common parlance, most of the people feel it as a negative peace, wherein you think of absence of war, absence of violence, respite from war, quietus to suits, wherein people enter into agreements, they enter into various treaties, like after ceasefire, they are sitting in for negotiations to bring back peace. But my concern is to move forward from negative peace because negative peace is looking for present and maybe for future short-term timescale solutions. I would go to the second leg of the peace, which I personally believe is true meaning of peace. That is positive peace. What I mean and what my understanding of positive peace is removal of structural violence. I'm not talking about physical violence. I'm not talking about war. I'm not talking about terror. I'm talking about the violence to our structure, to our relations, to our culture, wherein we are looking for elimination of poverty, elimination of inequality, where there is discrimination, there is disharmony, the people have less of tolerance about different religions, different belief system. So I'm talking about positive peace where we can eliminate these thought processes. So to me, positive peace is what the foundation of peace building. It is from here the peace building starts. The understanding about positive peace is peace building. And peace building, my dear friends, it's just not a term, it's a process. Do we need to wait for a conflict to happen in society to go for peacekeeping and peace building? It's a big question to us. United Nations in their preamble has clearly written that they will endeavor and determine to prevent the war, prevent our succeeding generations from the scourge of war. This is their preamble. So we are in a generation wherein we have generations behind us, those who are going to step into a world which is already full of conflict and war. It is not our duty as mediators and peace builders that instead of just going in for mediation and in a situation that you wait for a situation, let there be a conflict and then we mediate. No, our role is much before when conflict happens. And this is called as peace building. Peace building is a process of peace education. Let us all strive from our end, be it in school, be it in colleges, be it in our society, be it in our resident neighborhood. Let us endeavor to organize workshops wherein we have the peace education. Let people, because peace education, it's a beautiful process, which is a larger process than a mediation process. Mediation is something when you're in problem, then you go for mediation. I'm asking for prevention is better than cure. Why can't we go for workshops on peace education, which will actually be a peace building? Because it involves a lot of activities, peace building. We need to have change in our attitudes. We need to have change in our understanding. We need to inculcate peaceful behavior, wherein we have compassion, empathy for our fellow beings, for our neighbors, for our people working in same society. So we need to inculcate respect to them. We have to be little we have to have habit of forgiveness. Not everything has to be reacted. We can have responses also. Empathy is one big thing. How to use appropriate words. Dear friends, it is always said, words can cause wounds and words can also heal wounds. So we in that process of peace education can have workshops that how we can with proper appropriate use of expression words, we can communicate and even we can disagree with our fellow beings. A disagreement with respect can also be way of life. Why do we have to hit a person to convey our expression? Same thing can be beautifully crafted if we can have a proper expression of words. We convey our needs and wants without hitting somebody. Because most of the time, the first violence we inflict on somebody who we consider as our counterpart and enemy is through by our verbal expression. Let's use negative words. Is that a solution? No, that's not a solution. Violence, arms and ammunitions comes later on. But how we use, how we converse, how we have dialogue, conversations with our people in conflict, can we use proper expressions? These are such important issues which I think from day one in kindergarten school, in schools, in colleges, in professional courses, in organization, in setups, to our leaders. The leaders are leading our country. We have nations fighting each other for their territories. What for? At what cost? So it is basically my humble request through this platform is that, my dear friends, yes, if we are in conflict, we as mediators is fine. We have already undergone 40 hours of mediation training. Can we look for a solution? Can we look for days when we can together, few of us can come together and craft a workshop of 40 hours of peace building process, skills, peace education, which will definitely prevent lot of conflict in our society. Let's try to address the root cause of conflict, and let's just prevent that it is not inflicted on our next generations. Let us build a beautiful, give them something. We don't need properties, we don't need money to give to them. Let's give them peaceful environment so then they can really blossom and can be real ambassadors and envoys of peace. And together I am here. I'm always a very positive person. I would love to use expressions which can enlarge my group, which can I can embrace more in my family. I'm not a negative person, and I look forward to each one of you from our country, from India, where we have diverse culture and religion, that we really need harmony in our relationship, in our thoughts, in our communications. We have to be empathetic, and let's build a brighter, harmonious nation. It's a challenge, but it's a national and international responsibility on each one of us. So let us come together and build a peaceful society. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
شكرا سعادة الوزيرة على هذا التقديم الموجز وما أحوجنا إلى وساطة نحتاج في أنفسنا لنشر ثقافة السلام. كنت أيضا موجزة واحترمت الوقت، شكرا لك. نمر الآن طبعا إلى استراحة 5 دقائق ونعود مجددا المداخلة.
شكرا كمان فاتن. كنت بدي أقول إنه هاي الاستراحة بناء على طلب من المترجمة، لأنه وصلها بشكل متواصل حوالي أكثر من ساعة و10 دقائق بتقوم بعملية ترجمة، فهي محتاجة لبريك. رجاء خليكم معنا. Stay with us because the room is very full. We don't want to lose anybody of you. Thank you. Okay, here we are again. Thank you, Manar, the translator. To be honest, she put a lot of effort in translation, but I want to apologize that our colleagues, Fatma from Iraq, she can't join us. She are facing some health problems. I will talk about her in Arabic. فاطمة هي من العراق. في أوج الحرب العراقية الأهلية هي فقدت 2 من أبنائها. 2 من أبناء فاطمة قتلوا خلال الحرب، وقتلوا لأسباب تتعلق بالطائفية. قتلوا نتيجة لحروب ما بين السنة والشيعة. والقبيلة التي تنتمي إليها فاطمة أو العشيرة التي تنتمي إليها فاطمة لديها بعقيدتها وجوب أخذ الثأر، ولكن فاطمة بالمرتين على التوالي أصرت أن تصفح وأن تسامح وأن تعفو لأنها تؤمن بالسلام. كنت أود جدا أن تشارككم هذه القصة هي شخصيا، ولكن أرسلت لي على الواتساب أنه يتعذر عليها المشاركة لأنه أجرت عملية قسطرة الأسبوع الماضي وحاولت الدخول ولكن كمان لم تنجح بالدخول. فبنتمنى لها دائما السلام النفسي والطمأنينة، ونتمنى أيضا للعراق نفس ما نتمنى لفاطمة. سأنتقل لمايكل لانج صديقي العزيز who I really appreciate. هو واحد من أهم الوسطاء في العالم، واحد من أهم الأشخاص اللي يعني ينيروا بنورهم الطرق المظلمة. مايكل، أنا دايما مبسوط وسعيد بوجودك، وبدي تتفضل أنت تبدأ بالحديث الآن. شكرا. تفضل مايكل. إذا بتفتحوا السبيكر المايك لمايكل بليز. حدا
أتمنى له طلب فتح سبيكر. تمام،
شكرا. هو مغلق عنده. نعم. مين عم بتابع الموضوع يا جماعة؟
أستاذ محمد عاود يعني أشعر إنه المايك فتح.
One minute, Michael. I'm very sorry for that. Yeah, it's open now.
Good. Shall I proceed then? Thank you. Mohammed, I am grateful not just to be here, but for our friendship. It means everything to me. And I'm grateful to ACT for the opportunity. It is a joy. It's a privilege to be able to share this time with colleagues and with friends. And may peace be upon all of us, and soon. So I'm not, my family tells me I asked them once whether they thought that I was, whether I had found my calling in becoming a mediator. And the family's reaction was, "Are you kidding? Of course, you were born to do nothing else. You were a peacemaker." And once I found my calling, which happened 45 years ago, it has been an extraordinary opportunity for me to be able to use whatever God has given me by way of a mind, resources, resilience, capacity to help bring small amounts of peace to people. My work is at the micro level. I work with individuals. I don't work with governments. I don't work with countries. I don't work with warring factions. I know nothing of that. I have been graced in my life to have been free from that kind of oppression, of violence and horror and terror. So I can't speak to any of that except to say, as one human being, my heart is continually ripped apart by what is happening. What I can offer and what I hope will be of some benefit is I want to speak to us as peacemakers, as fellow peacemakers, not about the work of helping others manage their conflicts, resolve their disputes, bring measures of peace, whether it is through education, through mediation, through any of the work that has been done. But what I'm concerned about, and much of my professional work for the last 3 decades has been helping us as practitioners become the best we can be, to become resourceful, effective, and resilient practitioners. The work we do is difficult work. It doesn't just require our minds, which clearly it does. It takes something of our spirit in order to be able to sit in the presence of people who are deeply conflicted and to have the capacity to be in their presence and then assist them in finding some measure of comfort or resolution in the work that they do. And what I do now, and have been doing for many years, is helping colleagues learn from their experience so that they can be the best of themselves. Experience alone is not a sufficient teacher. Experience plus reflection, plus the opportunity to learn from those experiences is what really builds, takes the skills that we have, takes the knowledge that we have, and allows us to apply that knowledge and skill in the best possible way to the benefit of the people we have the privilege of working with, and to our own sense of self-satisfaction that we have done everything that we could do to be of use, to be of service, to be effective. And so my interest is, how do we become the best of ourselves? How do we replenish our spirit on an ongoing basis? And I have, over the last decades, been leading, facilitating groups of practitioners where we come together and we talk about the experience that we have as practitioners, and we learn with and from one another. It is a process that is in and of itself, it's restorative and it's nurturing for us as colleagues, as practitioners, and it enhances our capacities. And we do this by trusting one another and by learning with and from each other. And in the short time I have, it's difficult to explain how this process works. I'm going to see if I can without going over my time, tell a very short story and then make an offer. The short story is this. I was on an airplane, seated in the aisle seat, and in the middle seat was a child of about 8. And in the window seat was a man whom I later understood to be her father. The child was fixated on a game that she was playing. She had a controller in her hand, and she was looking at a screen on the back of the seat in front of her. And she was on her knees. She was so excited as she was playing this game. But at some point, she turned to her father and said, "Dad, this game is no fun. Nobody wins." And her father said, "So why do you think that's happening?" She said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, what do you think you could do about it?" And she said, "I'm going to try to play the game differently." And she did. And she began to win. And with every little victory, she bounced higher and higher and higher on the seat. And I was pretending to read my book, but her behavior was so infectious, it was impossible to ignore her. At a certain point, she said, turned to her father and said, "Dad, I won a bunch of games, but now they all end in a tie and it's no fun anymore." And her dad said, "Well, why do you think that happened?" And she thought for a bit and she said, "Well, Dad, I think the computer figured out what I'm doing, and that's why I'm not winning anymore." And he said, "Okay, sweetheart, what do you think you should do about that?" And she said, "I'm going to try another way to play the game." And she did, and she started to win again. And because it was a very short flight, it was time to put everything away and to land. And I thought this was a perfect example of what we do in our groups. And that is that we help somebody discover the lessons for themselves. We don't tell them what they ought to do, what they should have done. There is no second guessing. There is no judgment involved. It is trusting that the person has the knowledge within them, but somehow they're not connecting with it in a way that's allowing them to be as effective as they want to be. I left the plane, unfortunately, and did not have time to thank the father for that lesson and to say that I only hoped that I was half the father that he was, because he never told her the answer. He could have. He'd played that game as a child. He could easily have said that to her, but he didn't. He trusted her to figure it out for herself. And so she both learned how to play the game, but she learned about how to learn, which was even more a lasting lesson for her. And what I would like to do, if it is of any value to you, my colleagues and friends, would be to help organize and facilitate a group of colleagues that would meet on a regular basis. And we would share practice dilemmas, things that puzzle us, things that are difficult, things that could be surprisingly wonderful or irritating and frustrating, and spend time as colleagues, but also as fellow learners in that. So if there's an interest, that's my offer. I would gladly do that. I recognize that to accomplish that means people would have to make the time, but also we would have to find the funds to pay for a translator, and I will commit to helping to do that as well. I am grateful just to be in your presence. I wish that I could be in your physical presence. It would please me. Nothing would please me more. But at least to be part of this gathering was a true honor. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Michael. It's always like that. I'm always happy talking to you and listening to you too. As always. Thank you, my friend. Fatin, where are you?
وأستمتع موجودة طبعا، وأستمتع بكل لحظة.
ما في
مدخلنا التالي سيكون الأستاذ ربيع سفير، وإن شاء الله أكون يعني نطقت الاسم بالصح، محامي مدني ووسيط معتمدا دوليا، وطبعا له عدة تجارب متنوعة. قام الأستاذ ربيع بتشكيل مجموعة متنوعة خبرة واسعة في منازعات القانون بصفة عامة، وكان تركيزه على المنازعات العقارية، ولكن من خلال خبرته القانونية وتفانيه الكامل في حماية وضمان حقوق عملائه، كانت له مبادرات تميل إلى العطاء من خلال دوره الاستباقي في مساعدة الأطراف المتنازعة وأطراف الصراعات، يعني بصفة أدق على إيجاد الحلول رابح رابح من خلال اللجوء إلى التفاوض والوساطة. لكم الكلمة أستاذنا الكريم. طبعا أذكر أن الوقت فقط 10 دقائق حتى يكون المجال مفتوح للجميع للإدلاء بدربهم في هذا اللقاء. شكرا.
Greetings everyone. Dear Muhammad, ACT and Fatin, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for giving me the privilege of being part of this event. I appreciate the chance that you've given me to engage with such an esteemed mediator and audience. This event is about peace. It's about peace building and mediation. Nowadays, human beings are dealing with so many conflicts, yet the question remains, how can we solve these conflicts and reach a social consensus, building a peaceful society? The answer is through mediation learning and peace education. And what is better than teaching our youngster, our future generation, especially students, how to be peace builders, hoping they can aim for a better future and build a peaceful future amid the turmoil taking place in our region. I will be delving in the idea of cultivating peace through peer mediation at school, unveiling transformative benefits. In a world where fostering peace is a paramount, today we explore the vital role of peer mediation at schools as a cornerstone for cultivating lasting harmony. What do we understand by peer mediation? Peer mediation is a process aiming to train students and teach them about mediation, its method, its tools and techniques, hence cultivating the thinking of peace building and preparing them to achieve a better peaceful future. Mediation learning and peace culture building can and should begin at schools in order to make a change, to forge a cohesive, peaceful social consensus. I appreciate your presence as we delve into the transformative potential of this conflict resolution approach, not merely as a reactive measure, but as a proactive force for peace building. With this regard, I shall be outlining the benefits and advantages of peer mediation through the tangible example of two school students, Noor and Jad, who have a school disagreement of any nature whatsoever within their school framework, with May being the student mediator. Transformative benefits of peer mediation. The benefits and advantages of peer mediation are as follows. 1, fostering a lasting connection. Peer mediation not only resolves immediate conflict between Jad and Noor, but it also establishes a foundation for a stronger, more respectful relationship. In the broader context of peace building, these interpersonal connections contribute to a school culture where understanding and empathy thrive, creating a microcosm of peaceful coexistence. In fact, studies have shown that schools implementing peer mediation observe a significant 20% increase in positive peer relationship over the time. Skills development beyond the classroom. May, as a student mediator, sharpens her negotiation skills during a mediation session. These skills extend beyond conflict resolution, preparing her future personal and professional challenges. The acquisition of negotiation and communication skills is an investment in the next generation of peacemakers, nurturing individuals capable of resolving dispute constructively. Research indicates that students engaged in peer mediation programs demonstrate a 15% improvement in critical life skills, including communication and problem-solving abilities. 3, empowering student voice. And how often do we need our voices to be heard nowadays? Peer mediation empowers students like Jad, Noor, and May, and many others to express their concerns openly. As a result, the school environment becomes a space where everyone's voice is heard and valued. Empowering students to voice their concern is a fundamental step in building a culture of inclusivity and dialogue, fostering an atmosphere where diverse perspectives contribute to a shared vision of peace. A recent survey conducted among schools who established peer mediation programs revealed a 25% increase in students feeling empowered to voice their opinion and concern. Promoting reconciliation and understanding. When Jad and Noor, previously in a conflict, engaged in a peer mediation session, they not only resolve their issue, but also gain a deeper understanding of each other's perspective, fostering reconciliation. Reconciliation, as a part of peace building, creates an atmosphere where forgiveness and understanding prevail, laying the groundwork for sustained harmony within the school community and afterwards on a bigger social scale. Long-term data analysis indicates that schools with consistent peer mediation intervention experience a 30% reduction in recurring conflict, showcasing the enduring impact on reconciliation. Timely conflict resolution. In a hypothetical scenario where tension arises between two groups of students, peer mediation steps in promptly, preventing the escalation of conflict and maintaining a harmonious school atmosphere. Timely resolution is a base in preventing the ripple effect of conflict, contributing to an environment where students feel secure, free to focus on learning, which is an essential aspect of peace-centric school culture. School incorporating peer mediation observe an impressive 40% decrease in the duration of conflict, ensuring that issues are addressed in a timely and efficient manner. Building a supportive community. Through regular peer mediation initiatives, the school community becomes a support system. Students like May, Jad, or Noor will find comfort in knowing that conflicts are addressed constructively, creating a positive and cohesive environment. A supportive community is a cornerstone of sustainable peace building. Schools that prioritize peer mediation witness the emergence of a community where individuals feel connected, cared for, and committed to a shared ethos of peace. Statistical analysis at school implementing peer mediation constantly demonstrate a 35% of enhancement in the overall senses of community and support among students and staff. In conclusion, peer mediation emerges not just as a conflict resolution, but as a dynamic force for peace building at schools. Through fostering lasting connection, developing essential skills, empowering voices, promoting reconciliation, ensuring timely resolution, and building supportive community, peer mediation lays the foundation for a generation adept at cultivating peace. Thank you for your time and for your attention. Thank you.
ربيح صديقي العزيز، كالعادة شكرا لمداخلتك، وأنا دائما بنبسط بوجودك، فشكرا لك، شكرا كثير. وهلا كمان حدا يعني من اللي يمكن كلنا عم نستنى نسمعه، بتأمل إنه جيفري معانا. Jeffrey, we are all waiting to hear from you. Last week, I was talking to Michael, and he suggested that we will start talking together more and more about the peace-building issues. So we are all looking forward to hear now from you, Jeffrey. Please.
Very good. Well, thank you for this opportunity of sharing from our experience in Ireland as to how you create the political conditions to get out of the violence, to create this, to create ceasefires from the various groups. Is it possible, Mohammed, that I can share, you can share the screen with me and I could put up 1 or 2 PowerPoints? Yep. Will I try that? No, it's not coming up. Am I frozen? Can you hear me? Okay. Could Mohammed or the technician enable me to share the screen? Because I'd like to put up a 1 or 2 PowerPoints.
Hi, you already have the permission.
Okay, right. Then let's try and do that then. Very good. Okay. Let's go back to this one here then. Right. Excellent. Thank you. So for those of us who are peacemakers, we believe very strongly in that there is no military solution to conflicts. There has to be political solutions. And this graphic from a Greek vase, courtesy of Adam Curl, who created this idea of working with the Hydra. Here you have people, the militants, cutting off the heads of other militants. And the more they work at cutting those heads off, the more new heads appear from somewhere, either in those moments or 10 years later or 20 years later. And so this affirms to us or gives us a graphic to say that cutting off the heads of militants is not the way to go about it, because more young men will come forward and take up the gun because they love the gun and the adrenaline that comes from fighting, and also, so that's the virus of violence, but there's also the virus of freedom, of liberation, that it'll be past the suffering that military solution created will bring forward another generation of people who will aspire for freedom and be prepared to take up the gun to get that freedom. So it's simplistic to think that there can be a final solution through military means. That was our experience in Ireland, where we realized that you had to engage with the militants and bring them into some kind of peace process. One of the people who did that for us was this dialogue that developed between Gerry Adams, who was the political voice of the IRA militants. He became the dove among the hawks, and John Hume, who was more the nationalist center ground leader, and he, against a lot of criticism and a huge amount of political newspaper coming against him, he was agreeable and entered. He really believed in dialogue, and the two of them met with their parties. So, but it was a long journey. It took 30 years to get to the point of stopping the violence. And so we come back to this notion of there comes a time when people feel enough is enough. When I think it was Maria, wasn't it? I'm trying to get her name. Yeah. Nita. When Nita talked earlier about you either have to intervene early at the early stage, or it could take ages before you create these political conditions. And one of them is the hurting stalemate, that we've had enough. We've had enough of violence, and we now have a commitment to try to see how we can reimagine some new future. And so the challenge for mediators, peacemakers, is how do you help the parties reimagine their political relationship and reframe their ideological goals into more stepping stones, into they may not be able to achieve those goals immediately, but how do we build stepping stones for them to maybe achieve in some new way the things that are important for them. But above all, for people like John Hume, there is the challenge of taking a political risk for peace. And that's a real leadership quality. And not every political leader is prepared to make that political risk. They need to feel safe about it and to know that if they do make that risk, then that we've done the groundwork, the political groundwork, to make it possible for them to make those political step forward. So hope is huge here. And here we have the late Desmond Tutu, Archbishop in Cape Town, who really did believe that we as peacemakers, unless we can see the light, or we are the people of light, bringing that light into the darkness, and if we don't have that hope in ourselves, then we're not going to be able to be contagious with others for having that hope. And the other big peacemaker was Martin Luther King. And it's a bit like this hurting stalemate hypothesis, is that it's only when we are suffering, it's only when we are really in the dark, it's only then that we begin to look up or look out and to see if we can see the stars, to see those bits that will give us hope, that will bring us forward into new solutions. So that's where that was the journey that we in Ireland took. And if we go over to the left-hand side, it took us, it took almost 15 years for us to stop the political violence. There was earlier efforts to do that, and we got some earlier ceasefires, but it took longer for the really big movement to take place. And that came through political dialogue, through it's described in the literature, it's pre-negotiations, but it's really building blocks of peace that we can get to. And the big breakthrough came for us in 1994 when the IRA agreed for a ceasefire, and then we got the loyalists to agree as well. And that opened up, we're calling it the blue zone, out of the red of violence and the red of blood, the blue zone where blue sky avail, and we can begin to, in the comfort of or the safety of the gun not being present, we can sit down and create space for people to work together. And it was in that space that my work in building dialogue was happening. In this pre-negotiation space, one of the big peacemakers was a Catholic priest called Father Alec Reid, and he came from a monastery close to in the heart of nationalist Belfast, and it was called Clonard. And from there, they created safe spaces for people to come and to talk. So John Hume would come in the back door, and Gerry Adams would come in the front door into a meeting room in his place. And so this is too big a journey to go through to tell you, but it just shows you the role. If you look at Alec Reid in the middle here, all the connections that he made, what we call the go-between, to open up relationships and then to bring those people together into spaces. And that became a crucial process. He didn't take part in those negotiations. He was just the facilitator, bringing people together. And so one of the here there was this crucial meeting where John Hume brought his people together, and Sinn Féin through Jerry Adams brought their people together. And so Alec comes, he says a prayer at the beginning, greets everyone, and then he leaves and allows the parties to get on with the discussions. There was at least 3 or 4 several-day sessions that they held behind the scenes, and out of that came what were called the Hume-Adams proposals, which effectively became the basis for the Good Friday Agreement. So the day that Sinn Féin, in agreement with the IRA, called their ceasefire was a huge, big day. And here the cars went hooting around Belfast, carrying their flags, announcing the day. But the challenge was, could we get the loyalists who were on the Protestant side, Unionist side, and several months later, they also offered a ceasefire, and that created then the conditions for peacemaking. Here is the picture of the Glencree Centre for Reconciliation, which I've been involved in for many years. And when those ceasefires happened, we were able to go immediately to create dialogue spaces here up in the hills. And the kind of younger politicians came, and in those days, in the 1990s, there weren't mobile phones, and they could come in a safe space like this, cut away from people. I was hugely influenced by a man called Herb Kelman, who his family escaped from Vienna back in 1939 and came on into Harvard, and he devised problem-solving workshops, and it is said that many of the people that he brought together led to the Oslo talks and enabled those to succeed, which highlights that when you have negotiations, you have to have a lot of previous new thinking, new political thinking before you come to that moment. So that's the role of the workshops, to enable the different sides to meet each other in a human way. I didn't call them problem-solving workshops. I called the ones we did dialogue workshops, because I didn't think, well, it wasn't our role to come up with solutions, but it was much more to build trust between people. And it's essential, here were the ground rules, that we did not, as facilitators, we did not produce the agenda. When we came, those who came for the weekend, we enabled them to put up we went around each of the parties to say, what do you want to talk about this weekend? And so we stayed with their issues. Our role was to facilitate the process, and that I was the main facilitator of those discussions. And it wouldn't have happened unless what was called the Chatham House rules. It's confidentiality, but more than that, it's anonymity. That when people attend those workshops, they cannot go back and tell who was there and cannot convey what people said, but they can bring with them what the parties were saying and to bring those back up into the higher level of their parties. I got this lovely saying from the American Native community: you talk and you talk, and then the talk begins. So you have to be patient in the first round of talking, and then maybe there'll be that will trigger other things. But it's out of the next round of talking, the next phase within a weekend. That's when the nuggets, that's when the gems, that's where the key things can come out. And you as the facilitator need to create the space for the real talk then to happen and to work with. The other key person that I was hugely influenced by was from San Francisco, Carl Rogers, the counselor and client-based work. He had a process where he said, in the first instance, in a political workshop, I'm borrowing it or transferring it into the political workshop, each side, each person needs to be heard. If they're not heard, then they're going to give up. But what's the next layer of that is not just hearing their voice, hearing what's important for them, but unless they feel understood by the other. And of course, here they need to be heard by the facilitator first, or be understood by the facilitator, and that helps the other party or the others in the room to understand them. And when one party, a political leader, feels understood, then we don't just give up at that. We need to work at the next layer, which is being acknowledged. And being acknowledged is also the emotional acknowledgement of why that's important for people, or what is it in their journey, their political journey, has brought them to that point, and the things that they really feel want to be honored and understood and acknowledged in those moments. And that's the dynamic of a political dialogue weekend. And it's when people feel their story, their essence being heard, then that restores their dignity. And as we know, having your dignity restored is a huge process for going forward. I won't go much further than that, except to say that to use Herb Kelman's, many of the people who attended our workshops were what were called pre-influentials. Yes, they had connections up to their executive committees and the leaders of their parties, but as they became part of this process and hearing each other's, they then became influentials, helping their own people to understand the real issues and what was going on. And so we found that many of the participants took part in 1998 in the Good Friday Agreement discussions, and then they have stayed on. And now some of those participants are MPs or ministers or significant others. And so it's and so that's how the journey. I'm just trying to get out of this thing now. I stop share. Yeah. Okay. So so there you are. That's the journey that we made in Glencree with people, and I have and the challenge, of course, was I learned from Palestinian and Israeli discussions and that movement around the late 80s and early 90s, which led to the Oslo Agreement. But then, of course, it didn't fully work out or got undermined by subsequent political leaders. And that's, of course, one of the problems of implementing any agreement. You have to keep going and keep going to ensure and to keep. So our learning was, you just don't do one workshop. You have to keep the workshops going, and we did them for 10 years. And I personally facilitated about 50 of those workshops. And so peacemakers, we have a different role than peace builders. Peace builders are those who create the political conditions or the structural arrangements. Our role as peacemakers is to connect people together and to enable them to be heard and understood and acknowledged. And if we achieve that, well, then we've achieved our goal. Thank you very much.
شكرا على هذه المحاضرة القيمة دكتور جيفري. وفعلا هناك فرق كبير بين بناة السلام وصناع السلام، وما أحوجنا إلى فهم هذه التفرقة. الآن الكلمة للمهندس تيسير سلمان محميد، مدير دائرة مراكز الحوار والوساطة في المجتمع العربي في الداخل، جمعية مزعكة. هل أنتم موجود أستاذ مهندس تيسير؟
نعم هل تسمعون؟
تفضل، الكلمة لكم و10 دقائق وشكرا.
مساء الخير للجميع. أولا نشكر طبعا مؤسسة أكت لحل النزاعات بإدارة الأستاذ محمد هادي والقائمين والمساعدين على تنظيمها هذا المؤتمر، مؤتمر أسبوع الوسائل البديلة لحل النزاعات. في الحقيقة أنا يعني حابب أشارككم تجربة شخصية اللي أنا عشتها واللي إحنا بنعيشها هاي الفترة، خاصة فترة النزاع أو الحرب الدائرة في منطقة الشرق الأوسط أو ما بين الفلسطينيين والإسرائيليين. واخترت أن يكون عنوان يعني المداخلة النزاعات الإدراكية التي تؤثر على مفهوم الصراع. أنا باعتباري طبعا يعني كي يعني يتعرف علي الجميع، باعتباري من ناحية يعني أنتمي إلى الأقلية الفلسطينية والتي يعني هي أيضا تحظى بالمواطنة الإسرائيلية. أنا أيضا فلسطيني وفي نفس الوقت طبعا مواطن دولة إسرائيل. فإنسان يعني يعيش هذه الظروف التي يعني نعيشها هذه الأيام، أيام الحرب الدائرة. في الحقيقة يعني الإنسان يعني بيكون في حيرة من أمره أحيانا في حالات معينة. ف فكلنا كوننا طبعا نتعامل مع تسوية النزاعات والوساطة، كلنا يعلم أن يعني أي صورة ننظر إليها أو أي صورة لخلاف ننظر إليها يعني بتعلق مين اللي بنظر إليها ومن أي جهة ننظر إلى الخلاف يعني من وجهة نظر من يرصده. فللخلاف عدة أوجه، ولكن يعني بتعلق من أي أنت وجه تنظر إلى الخلاف. ونجد يعني أنفسنا حائرين حقيقة في هذه الظروف وفي هذه الأزمة. ومن وحي هذه الأزمة حبيت هيك أسلط الضوء على ديناميكا الصراع اللي من خلال نظرية عالم النفس ألفريد أدلر. كيف يعني لما الإنسان بيكون في حدث معين كيف بفسر الحدث، كيف تفسير الحدث هذا بيؤدي لمشاعر معينة، وهذه المشاعر طبعا قد تؤدي إلى ردود أفعال. حالة الصراع وحالات الحروب وحالات الأزمات كما نعلم ويعلم الجميع برافقها عادة حالة عدم ثقة، شعور بالخوف، تردد، الشك، توتر. وأصعب ما في الموضوع موضوع شيطنة الآخر، ما يسمى شيطنة الآخر. أوكي. وطبعا لعب دور الضحية. وعادة في حالات الأزمات والأزمات الكبرى بكون هناك طبعا مفهوم طبعا الهوية ومفهوم نحن ومفهوم هم والتفكير الانتقائي، وبكون هناك يعني نوع من أنواع اعتماد أنماط تفكيرية ومسبقة واتجاه المجموعات الأخرى. أنا قبل ما أعطي بعض الملاحظات اللي من وحي هذه الفترة، هذه فترة النزاع والخلاف والحرب التي نعيشها هذه الأيام، والتي لها آثار محلية ولها انعكاسات ممكن تكون إقليمية، وحتى ممكن من يدري قد تكون لها انعكاسات حتى دولية. فبالتالي طبعا هذه الانعكاسات تؤثر علينا نحن كبني البشر، ولنا والذين لهم علاقة مباشرة بهذه الأحداث. لا شك أنه الصراع الإسرائيلي الفلسطيني هو صراع يعني شائك وطويل الأمد ومتشعب، وهو صراع يعني كمان على الهوية، كمان هناك صراع على الهوية. فبدي هيك أعطيكم من خلال بحث علمي أجرته بروفيسور يهودي أورباخ من جامعة بار إيلان اللي يعني تمثل أو تعنون بهرم المصالحة. فيوديت أورباخ هذه الباحثة طبعا هذا يعني أجرت هذا البحث العلمي على الصراعات اللي أساسها بيكون صراعات هوية. فهي تعتقد أنه يعني كي تكون المصالحة، كي نصل إلى المصالحة لابد أنه إحنا يعني نتخطى 7 مراحل. المرحلة الأولى هي التعارف أو المعرفة، يعني أن تعرف وتتعرف على الآخر، والآخر هنا طبعا اللي أنا أختلف معه أو طرفي النزاع. وثم بالمرحلة التي تليها مرحلة الاعتراف بالآخر، أو وثم مرحلة التعاطف، ثم مرحلة تحمل المسؤولية، وبعدها مرحلة التعويض، ثم الاعتذار. وفي في المرحلة الأخيرة قبل أن نصل إلى المصالحة بين طرفي النزاع على أساس هوية، بيكون هناك الجمع بين أو دمج الروايات. لكل طرف طبعا كما نعلم جميعا في له عادة قصته، في له روايته، وكي نصل إلى يعني دمج الروايات التي تسبق المصالحة أو ما تسمى بالمصالحة. فاللي أنا بدي أركز عليه من خلال مداخلتي هون هو قضية أن تتعرف على الآخر، أن تعرف الآخر، أن تكسر الحواجز الإدراكية، يعني والنظرات أو القول به، يعني أن يكون هناك قوالب للناس من وجهة نظرك والأطراف. يعني كلنا يعرف أننا عندما نختلف مع الآخر فنحكم عليه أحكام مسبقة، هو كذا هو كذا هو كذا. ولكن يعني أنا أعتقد من خلال تجربتي والقصص اللي صارت معي بهذه الفترة إنه لازم نبادر لمعرفة الآخر، حتى لو كنا مختلفين معه، حتى لو كنا مختلفين ولا نتفق معه، حتى لو كان لنا رواية ولا له رواية مختلفة تماما، حتى لو كان هناك متناقضات، حتى لو كان هناك مصالح متناقضة، حتى لو كان هناك احتياجات ومشاعر مختلفة، إلا أنه من خلال الحوار المباشر، من خلال إزالة الحواجز، ممكن أن تتعرف على الآخر، وممكن أن تنظر إلى نصف الكأس الملآن لدى الطرف الآخر حتى لو كنا مختلفين مع طرف. هذه هي رسالتي حقيقة هذا المساء. رسالتي هذا المساء للمتخاصمين. عادة صحيح أنه هناك يعني نصف كأس اللي هو خلينا نقول الأسود، ولكن هناك أيضا نصف كأس آخر اللي أحيانا إحنا وقت الصراع نتجاهله. هناك الوجه الآخر للطرف اللي إحنا متنازعين معاه، اللي إحنا ما انكشفنا عليه، ما تعرفنا عليه، ما عرفنا يعني خلينا نقول ماذا يخفي، ماذا لم يظهر لنا من الشخص الآخر. فنحن يعني عادة وقت الصراع لا نرغب طبعا في الالتفات إلى النصف أو الجانب الجيد أو الجانب الإيجابي للطرف الآخر. فكي يكون عملي حقيقة في الفترة هاي فترة الحرب، يعني عشت تجربة أنا والأستاذ محمد هادي زميلي وصديقي، كنا في دورة استكمال، كنا لازم نلتحق في دورة استكمال في منطقة تل أبيب. وتخيلوا في بعد 7 أكتوبر كانت الأجواء مشحونة، حالات تردد، حالات ترقب، حالات خوف في الطرفين. يعني أنا لا أقول عند العرب وحدهم ولا عند اليهود وحدهم، عند الطرفين كان حالات تردد وترقب وخوف وتشكك وغضب شديد واندفاع وانفعال. لذلك كنا أنا والأستاذ محمد يعني لازم نلتحق في دورة للتخصص في مجال العائلة، الوساطة العائلية، وكانت هذه الدورة موجودة في تل أبيب. وفي اليوم الأول للدورة ترددنا أنا والأستاذ محمد، يعني هل يعني نذهب ونشارك، هل نذهب إلى منطقة تل أبيب كوننا يعني اثنيناتنا، يعني أنا والأستاذ محمد عرب، ونريد أن نلتحق بدورة اللي كل أعضائها يهود. فيعني انتابنا شعور هيك من الخوف، من التردد، ممكن خوف، ممكن تردد، أنا ما بقول خوف، أما ممكن بقول تردد. ممكن يعني ممكن هيك انه ليش ممكن نتعرض لنقد، لاذى، والعكس صحيح. ممكن الطرف الاخر طبعا يعني يفكر بنفس الطريقه. فاتخذنا قرار انه احنا ما نشارك في يعني وجاهي، واتخذنا قرار انه نشارك عبر الزوم. لكن في الاسبوع اللي تلاه ممكن استوعبنا الإشي أكثر، ممكن امتلكنا شوية جرأة أكثر أو إدراك أكثر، تفهم أكثر للقضية من خلال عملنا كمان يعني، وخبرتنا وتجربتنا في النزاعات، في خلفيات النزاعات، في تسوية النزاعات. ممكن يعني هيك امتلكنا شوية جرأة، وكنا لا لازم احنا اذا احنا بدناش نشارك يعني مين بده يشارك؟ اذا احنا بدناش نبادر مين بده يبادر؟ اذا احنا بدناش نحتوي مين بده يحتوي؟ فاخذنا كل هالمهارات هاي من عالم الوساطة وانطلقنا الى تل ابيب. ويعني خلينا نقول التحقنا في الدورة على مدار 7 لقاءات، وتعرفنا على الاخر والتقينا بالاخر ضمن الاجواء المريبة والمشاهد المخيفة، ضمن الألم عند الشعبين. وأحيانا طبعا يعني طبعا الأخبار تتوافد هنا وهناك وتخبر طبعا عن أحداث مؤسفة. في ظل هذه الأجواء ويعني تفاجأنا إنه كيف الطرف الثاني تقبلنا، تفاجأنا كيف إحنا تقبلناهم، تفاجأنا كيف صرنا نحكي مع بعض، وصرنا نتبادل الأفكار والآراء من خلال طبعا 7 لقاءات. وإذا بنا في اللقاء الأخير وقبل الأخير يعني تسود الأجواء نوع من الثقة والمحبة والمشاركة والتعاطف، لدرجة حتى مرات يعني حتى كنا نمتنع يعني أن نشارك بعضنا حتى أجواء الحرب وما يدور هناك، إلا أننا لما وصلنا لمرحلة ثقة معينة حتى يعني خضنا في حديث الساعة، ويعني وكل منا تعاطف مع الآخر ومع الألم تبع الآخر. ثم اكتشفنا أنه الآخر هو كمان إنسان، هم اكتشفوا كمان إحنا برضو بشر، لنا احتياجاتنا، لنا مصالحنا، لنا أهدافنا، في إلنا قصتنا، في لهم قصتهم، فينا روايتنا، في لهم روايتهم. فأنا يعني فالتجربة اللي خضناها الأستاذ محمد يعني أعطتنا إنه نكشف على الآخر، وإنه لما أنت بتنظر للآخر أو للجانب المشرك لدى الآخر فأنت بتتعرف على شيء جديد ما عرفته.
بدي أستأذن تيسير فقط بدقيقة إذا تكرمت.
الحقيقة يعني أخرى مرة يعني في عدة قصص اللي صارت معنا بهاي الفترة اللي نفس الجوهر، نفس جوهر الحديث. بس بحب أقول إني أنا كنت بهاي الفترة في مستشفى في تل أبيب، أخوي كان مريض وكنت أزوره، وكمان واجهت قصص من هذا النوع. كيف يعني الطبيب العربي يعمل مع الطبيب اليهودي، المساعد العربي، المساعدة العربية، والممرض والممرضة العربية واليهودية. كيف المرضى أنفسهم بتعاطفوا مع بعضهم، كيف بيحكوا مع بعضهم، كيف بيشاركوا همومهم مع بعضهم، كيف بيهتموا في بعضهم، وكيف بيلقوا التحية على بعضهم. وكل هذا إيش يعني في ظل أجواء حرب. فأنا الرسالة اللي بدي أقولها حتى لو كنا في أجواء حرب ممنوع إحنا نفقد الأمل، ممنوع نفقد الأمل في التعايش، في التصالح، في تقليل الشحنات. وبالذات نحن سفراء السلام، نحن الوسطاء، سفراء المحبة. يعني إحنا لازم نكون يعني مثل يحتذى به في بث التفاؤل ونشر السلام وبناء السلام بين الشعوب والأقوام والأطراف المتخاصمين. أشكركم على هذه الفرصة، وتحية لكم جميعا مني.
شكرا أستاذ تيسير محميد. بهمني ألفت النظر فقط بأنه الأستاذ تيسير محميد هو من الداخل الفلسطيني، هو من أم الفحم. البعض بيسأل أسئلة وبلشت توصلني رسائل على الخاص. هذه اللغة المختلفة اللي عم بيسمعوها البعض، اللي عم بيسمعوها الناس، اللي أنا بحب أقوله بهذه المناسبة وبعد هذا الحديث، بأنه أنا بعيش بمدينة القدس. بالنسبة لي مدينة القدس هي مدينة محتلة، وأنا أعيش تحت الاحتلال. الآخرين، البعض يسمع الآن من بقية مدن الضفة الغربية التي يعني تحت ولاية السلطة الفلسطينية، وقد يكون هذا الحديث الذي يسمعه من الأخ تيسير أيضا غريب. البعض إخواننا وأخواتنا من الدول العربية أيضا يسمعوا ما هذا الكلام، عن ماذا، عن أي تعاطف يتحدث. فكرة الوساطة وبناء السلام هي فكرة قائمة على عقلية أن أسمع، وقد يكون للأستاذ تيسير وجهة نظر ورؤية، هو بيعيش في مكان اللي بلش حديثه بأنه بيعيش بمكان مختلف عن المكان اللي أنا بعيش فيه، وعن المكان اللي أكثر من حدا بيعيش فيه. شكرا أستاذ تيسير على مشاركة هذه التجربة الشخصية. بدي أنتقل من أم الفحم إلى واشنطن. رح أنتقل لفرانسيس. فرانسيس هو من أصول أوغندية، قدم حديثا إلى واشنطن وأسس مركز واشنطن للوساطة. بنحب كتير يشاركنا بتجربته الآن. Francis, if you are ready, we are pleased to hear you. So please, 10 minutes if you can. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. If there is ever a time that we need hope, it is now. If there is ever a time that we need people with strong moral conviction to stand firm and speak against conflict, it is now. And I am so happy to have this opportunity to share my perspectives about peace as a mediator and as a peace builder. Talking about peace at this time is such a courageous move, considering where we are. Right now, as we speak, there is a global deterioration of peace. There is a global death, which has increased up to 98%. More than 100 people are forcibly displaced from their home. And over 333 million people around the world are facing hunger as a result of conflict. There are over 79 countries that have witnessed increase in conflict. Not only that, the global military budget has increased to a new height of $2,240 billion. And the peace building or peacekeeping expenditure just totaled to a 34.1 billion, which is equivalent to 0.4% of the military spending. Even with this staggering number, which would make one doubt the possibility of a better world free from conflict, we are here today to say peace is possible. However, to truly achieve peace, we need to unlearn some of our old approaches in order to learn some of new approaches. For example, it is impossible to truly achieve true peace or positive peace based on fear, defeat, or this zero-sum approach, which military intervention often result in. True peace or positive peace can only be achieved based on understanding, respect, and collaboration. Today, I joined this call as a mediator and as a peace builder. As a mediator and a peace builder, we have or should have unique skills to facilitate effective communication, which is the which is the foundation of understanding, trust, empathy, and collaboration. This effective communication entails being curious with compassion. That is to say, asking questions without judgment and truly embodying the heart of listening. When I'm talking about listening, I'm talking about listening with our ears to what is being said, listening with our eyes to what has not been said, but has been spoken to non-verbally. We are listening to the common interests, and we are also listening to the differing interests. I'm talking about acknowledging and validating emotion and the fear behind those emotions. I'm talking about focusing on interests as opposed to person or position. And lastly, I'm talking about joint problem solving. Considering the dire needs for these skills, we as the mediators, we cannot wait to use these skills only in our mediation sessions. Now more than ever, we should make these skills available to the public, so the public are empowered to apply these skills in their home, their communities, their societies, and their country. And we can do so by having opportunity such as this. And that is one of the things that me and my colleagues at the DC Mediation and Dispute Resolution Institute are working towards achieving. Today, I am joining this call from another continent. I may be safe or may be far from where there is active conflict happening. But I am not safe from it because my liberty is bound with the liberty of those individuals suffering directly as a result of the conflict, be it in Gaza, Ukraine, Ethiopia, Sudan, Congo, Israel, and all the other countries in the world that are experiencing conflict. Our liberty is bound together. But I stand here to say peace is possible. Together, we can achieve it. In order to achieve it, we will need to unlearn some of the old practices in order to learn new practices. We will need to empower as many people as possible with the skills to use so that we can move from this negative peace intervention into approaches that will cultivate a positive peace. Thank you.
شكرا فرانسيس على هذه المداخلة القيمة ومشاركتكم وجهودكم في نشر السلام في العالم. طبعا الكلمة الآن إلى رمزي. رمزي هو موسر تفاوض ومترجم فوري من العربي إلى الإنجليزي في بيئات متعددة الثقات. هل أنت موجود رمزي؟ شكرا. طبعا قام بعدة دورات في بناء الجسور من وجهة نظر الاستقطابية إلى العمل الموحد. لكم الكلمة رمزي.
أشكرك أستاذة فاتن. أتمنى أنك تطمنيني أن وصول الصوت.
نعم تفضل.
تمام أشكرك. مرحبا جميعا، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be with you here today. سوف أقوم بالترجمة بنفسي وأعطي الراحة للسيدة الزميلة المترجمة. I will translate for myself and I'll speak quickly, flipping between English and Arabic. سوف أسرد عليكم بعض النقاط الأساسية بدلا من سرد الروايات. وأتيح الفرصة في المستقبل لسرد الروايات التي تعطي الخلفية وراء تلك النقاط. I'm going to give you briefly a review of main points rather than telling you stories which are the basis of these main principles. هناك فرق بين اللغة واللسان. There's a difference between language and the linguistic sense of language. That is to say, a linguistic sense of language is Arabic, English, French. Language, in which way I mean it, is the set of principles, values, which determine the way a particular party looks at the world. استخدم كلمة اللغة بمعنى المفاهيم والقيم التي تحدد نظرة الطرف أو الجهة المعينة إلى الأمور. ومن ثم فهناك تداعيات لاختيار الألفاظ. This therefore determines the consequences of the choice of terminology. So, for example, when I worked in Syria, when we were talking about a temporary phase between a lack of trust between two groups and renewed trust, I was very careful to avoid the use of the word transitional phase. حينما كنت أعمل في سوريا مثلا وأتحدث عن المرحلة فيما بين عدم وجود ثقة بين أطراف معينة وإيجاد ثقة بناء على العمل المشترك، فكنت أحاول بقدر الإمكان أتجنب الانتباه إلى أو استخدام لفظ مرحلة انتقالية لأنها لديها تداعيات أخرى. تحدثنا كثيرا عن عدم التساوي في القوة أو النفوذ بين الأطراف المتنازعة. We've spoken a lot about the asymmetry between the conflicting parties. ولكن هناك مع ذلك ضرورة في الأخذ بعين الاعتبار دور كل جهة في تحقيق مصالح الجهات الأخرى، حتى إن لم تكن لديها مساواة في النفوذ أو النفوذ، دعنا نقول النفوذ أو الإقناع. So we need to still look at the role of each party in helping the other party or parties achieve their objectives, rather than just being too upset or worried about the perceived asymmetry. فعلى سبيل المثال مثلا المنظمات الإنسانية قد تكون لها دور في تقارير سلطات الدولة إلى لجنة حقوق الإنسان. So, for example, humanitarian organizations may play a role in the periodic reports as part of the Universal Periodic Review process, where a country's authorities are required to report to the Human Rights Council. علينا أيضا أن نميز بين الأفعال والأقوال وألا يكون هناك ألا يكون هناك تضارب بينهم. We have to distinguish between acts and deeds and for them to be consistent at the end of the day. If a humanitarian organization insists on its identity as being humanitarian but behaves in a way that may be perceived as not humanitarian, then there's a problem. فمثلا إذا تصرفت منظمة إنسانية بطريقة يمكن على أساسها اتهامها بأنها تتصرف بطريقة غير إنسانية، هناك مشكلة بالطبع. فدائما ينبغي الحرص على عدم وجود تضارب أو تناقض بين الأفعال والأقوال. تحدثنا كثيرا ربما بصورة ضمنية عن صلابة المواقف التي تحول دون الوصول أو التوصل إلى حل النزاع. We've spoken a lot about the rigidity of the positions taken by the conflicting parties, and this is therefore, or can be, compensated by the flexibility of a mediator. The different conflicting parties might be hostages to their positions, and it is really down to the flexibility of the mediator to be creative and help them find a third way that encompasses the apparently incompatible positions. إذن فيتعين على الوسيط أن يقوم بطريقة أخرى بإيجاد مسار ثالث يوفق بين المواقف التي تبنتها الأطراف المتنازعة. يقال دائما هل الكوب نصف مليان. It's often said is the cup half empty, half full. أنا دائما أقول أن الكوب مليان تماما. I always say the cup is fully full, completely full, partly with air, partly with water. فهو مليان بالمياه وبالهواء. ولا يمكن العيش بدون المياه أو بدون الهواء على حد سواء. I always say the cup is completely full and you can't live without air or water at the end of the day. Now let's talk about the time factor. دعونا الآن نتطرق إلى العامل الزمني، وعلينا أن ننتبه إلى العوامل الخارجية المحافظة على استمرار النزاع. First of all, we must look at the external factors which keep the conflict going. And by conflict, I mean armed conflict here. وما هو الثمن المترتب على ذلك? And what is the cost or the price being paid for that? فبوسعنا أن نأخذ على سبيل المثال الحصر النزاع بين أوكرانيا وروسيا. We could take as an example the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and we could say that is being kept going by the continuous supply of weapons and materiel to Ukraine. And also I'll be specific, the United States sees a benefit in the conflict continuing in order to weaken the Russian armed forces. ففي حال النزاع بين أوكرانيا وروسيا استمرار إمداد الجانب الأوكراني بالأسلحة والعتاد، فهذا يساعد يصح التعبير على استمرار النزاع. لكن هناك ثمن. الثمن هو أن لا يمكن للأطراف الخارجية الإمداد إمداد الجانب الأوكراني بالسلاح والعتاد بلا نهاية. وفي النهاية سوف يصلوا إلى نقطة لا يمكن تجاوزها من حيث التكلفة أو الحصول على العتاد والسلاح الضروري. There is a price, which is that they will come to a point, the external factors, the exterior parties, where they will not be able to continue to supply, for example, Ukraine in this case, indefinitely with weapons and material. في حال النزاع بين إسرائيل والجانب الفلسطيني، فالتفت إلى اعتراض على حديثي في الشات، فهنا أستأذن السيد محمد هدية في الاستمرار أم التوقف؟
لا تفضل أستاذ رمزي، أكمل، وبقي من الوقت 4 دقائق.
نعم، أشكرك. في حال النزاع بين الجانب الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني, in the case of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, you could say that an exterior factor is continuing to provide political cover for Israel in the United Nations in terms of the use of the veto by the US. فمن ضمن العوامل الخارجية التي تساعد على استمرار النزاع بين الجانب الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني هي التغطية السياسية في الأمم المتحدة من حيث استخدام حق النقد في مجلس الأمن على سبيل المثال للحصر مثلا. جانب آخر من العوامل الزمنية، الإشارة إلى حل النزاع بعد الانتهاء من العمليات العدائية. Another aspect of the time factor is talking about resolving the conflict after the cessation of hostilities. We see that example in Russia-Ukraine, the day after the conflict has ended. The same again in the reference to the resolving conflict between Israel and Palestine. Antony Blinken again talked about the need for there to be a two-state solution after the end of the conflict, which means the conflict can keep going. فتم الإشارة أو استخدام نفس اللفظ من قبل أنتوني بلينكن بالنيابة عن الجانب الأمريكي، إشارة إلى إيجاد حل للخلاف بين الجانب الفلسطيني والإسرائيلي بعد الانتهاء من العمليات العدائية. إذن هذا بصورة ضمنية يسمح باستمرار العمليات العدائية. بعد ذلك إمكانية الاحتواء ودرجة الاستخفاف في المخاطر. The other aspect to keep the conflict going are the possibility of containment and underestimating the risks. And really it is this evaluation that can keep the conflict going or not. وهذا التقييم هو من ضمن العوامل الرئيسية الذي يؤدي إلى الاستمرار النزاع أو إيقافه. أخيرا وليس آخرا، اعتبار الاستعانة بوسيط كنقطة ضعف. It is possible in some cases that resorting to using a mediator can be seen as a sign of weakness. That the two parties, especially those who are at the top of the hierarchy, should have the competence to take part in direct negotiations, and they shouldn't really need a mediator. ففي حال اعتبار طرف من الطرفين أو كلاهما أن الاستعانة بوسيط هي نقطة ضعف، وأن ينبغي أن يكون بوسع من هم في أعلى الهرمية بالخوض مباشرة في المفاوضات حينما يحلو لهم، فيعتبر الاستعانة بوسيط نقطة ضعف، وهذا من ضمن العوائق ويؤدي إلى الاستعانة بالوسيط بعد فوات كثير من الزمن. أخيرا وليس آخرا، من ضمن المستجدات مظهر أو ظاهرة الوسطاء الداخليين. So a new development is something referred to as insider mediation or insider mediators. هذا معناه الاستعانة، أي استعانة طرف أو طرفين على حد سواء بزملاء من داخل نفس المنظمة بمن لديهم خبرة بعقلية ومفاهيم ومعطيات وأولويات الطرف الآخر. So inside the mediators are really members of the same organization who are considered to have a more in-depth understanding of the perspectives of the other side. And I'll put in the chat later a useful link to this from the UNDP. سوف أدخل في الشات بعد لحظة رابط قد يكون يحظى باهتمام الحضور بخصوص الاستعانة بالوسطاء الداخليين. العامل القانوني
الوقت أستاذ رمزي إذا تكرمت.
تمام، ممكن تعطيني بالكثير دقيقتين يا أستاذ محمد؟
يعني تفضل، بس حاول قد ما بتقدر لأنه اجتزت الوقت.
أكيد أكيد. فالعامل القانوني ينبغي التمييز بين تحميل المسؤولية ومطالبة التعويضات من ناحية، وبين حل النزاع من ناحية أخرى وعدم خلط الأمور. It's important to distinguish and separate between seeking accountability and compensation and between the solution or the resolution of the conflict. Because when these two get combined, they lead to getting nowhere at the end of the day. أخيرا وليس آخرا، أقول أن عدم الثقة هو شيء جيد. I always say that absence of confidence or trust is good because it leads to more effective monitoring، لأنه يؤدي إلى درجة أفضل من المراقبة ومراجعة دورية منتظمة. Also leads to regular routine review between the two parties, preferably with the presence of the conflicting parties and also with the presence perhaps of the mediator to keep things on track. أخيرا وليس آخرا، ينبغي إيجاد خط ساخن وناقوس إنذار. There needs to be a hotline system involved and also some kind of warning system to really catch things before they get out of balance and go back into being a situation of possible conflict. I'll end there. Very sorry for taking so much time. أتمنى تقبل اعتذاري على الإطالة في الوقت، ولكن من ناحية أخرى ينبغي احترام الزميلة الفاضلة المترجمة وإعطائها درجة من الراحة حينما أمكن ذلك. أشكركم.
شكرا للمداخلة اللي عملتها، وهي مهمة ومختلفة إلى حد ما. شكرا لتعاونك وتفهمك للدور اللي عم تعمله كمان أختنا منار المترجمة، لأنه كمان أنت بنفس المجال فبتقدر تفهم الاحتياج، فأنت كمان ساعدت بأنه هي ترتاح لمهلة. رح يكون عندنا محيط، ورح يكون عندنا بالختام فكرام، ومعناه أنه إحنا سنختتم من الهند. محيط، أنا بحب أنه أنت تبدأ. بنعتذر أنه إحنا أخرناك، كان وقتك لازم يكون قبل هيك. شكرا لصبرك ولتفهمك، ورجائي قديش تقدر الالتزام بالعشر دقائق. شكرا جزيلا. بليز محيط.
Sure. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Hidey, for inviting me to be here. I will today talk very briefly about the history of nonviolence and how it relates to the work we are doing and what goes on in the world today. Now, to begin with a small quote, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi once said, "An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind." Right? And through his non-violent means, through his non-cooperation movements, he was able to help India gain independence from the British, for the British who ruled over India for more than 200 years and who treated Indians as second-class citizens, right? And Indians in our own country, we didn't get the same rights as our colonizers did. We've seen non-cooperation, non-violence work when Gandhi went to South Africa, where he faced and he saw firsthand what apartheid looked like, right? Through him and Mr. Nelson Mandela, non-violence spread in Africa as well. We saw the success of non-violence through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa that was set up, which was, I think, one of the first times we saw what restorative justice in action looks like. And we saw how the victims and the oppressors were able to talk and understand each other. And over time, we see how that's helped bridge the gap in South Africa. We also know that the work of Martin Luther King was influenced by Gandhi, and was also very helpful in America to bridge the gap between the racial divide, right? In several instances where people tend to not get along, where there is a great power imbalance, it's very often very easy for us to resort to violence, for us to fall into the trap when things escalate. To talk a little bit more about what Gandhi said, his non-violence and his practice of non-violence was very popularly and commonly known as satyagraha, which meant which was more a principled non-violent style. An American political scientist, Gene Sharp, in 1987 wrote a book about the politics of non-violent action. And in this, he distinguished between Gandhi's principled non-violence and a more pragmatic non-violence. Pragmatic non-violence would include, active and deliberate non-cooperation, withdrawal from social, economic, and political cooperation. And this is how Gandhi was able to channelize his principled non-violence into pragmatic non-violence by not cooperating with the British. During the end of the occupied India era, way before the independence, we saw that Gandhi used these movements of non-cooperation against the British, not buying from them, not facilitating any trades with them. And this is what helped India become independent, truly self-sustainable, and helped us not rely on the British as much anymore. Of course, we understand and we see today, and this is something that troubles me as well. We know that right-winged political stances are in a rise around the world, including in India. We see that major political parties are not protecting the minorities. And it was Gandhi that once said that the true value of a democracy is not measured by how the majoritarians live. It's how the minorities are protected. And we can see this rise in hate, this rise in violence across the world. We've seen it in Russia, in Ukraine, we've seen it in India. We are now seeing it in Israel and Palestine. We've also seen this in Brazil, in US, in France, in endless places. So as a community of mediators, I have, the role of mediators in this nonviolent, to promote nonviolence is to be as peace builders, right? To bridge the difference in divides in culture, in information, to promote more understanding. And I would like to use this forum to have a call to action to all mediators around the world, that even when in the toughest situations, people are not able to understand each other, when people are resorting to violence, let's keep doing our job. Let's make sure that we promote communication. Let's make sure we promote understanding and resolving things through a more peaceful method. I would like to very quickly close with a small quote from a very nice poem that I like, by Mr. Dylan Thomas, a Welsh poet. And it goes, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me. Thank you, Mr. Hede. I'll pass the mic back to you. Mr. Vikram, am I supposed to pass it to you? Sorry.
No, I think we'll go through someone will call me.
شكرا لك. شكرا أستاذ محيط. الكلمة الآن إلى الدكتور فيكرام. عفوا، هل أنت موجود؟
شكرا. يب. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام. طبعا اسمح لي فقط في ثواني. تقيم بالهند وتعيش في ملاعب الجولف وعلى شاشات الكمبيوتر والجوال في جميع أنحاء العالم. وسيط ومحامي، نركز على دور الوسيط ودور السلام بدوام كامل. عضو في فريق الوسطاء والموفقين التابعين لوزارة الشؤون العامة في حكومة الهند. شكرا على قبولك الدعوة. تفضل.
Of course, I have to do my little Arabic. Shukran Muhammad ala Dawati. And that's my Arabic, nothing more than that. Look, what I'm going to do is I would, of course, talk about the work that I'm doing, because I just feel that there is a lot of content which I have put out there. And for people to benefit in relation to everything else, I'm sure very good things have been discussed here, which I, of course, missed out on a lot of it. So if that's okay, Mohammed, I'll talk about the World Mediation Circle, which is what I've created. So the idea was, yeah, thanks. Yeah, if I would also maybe just share my screen and put up where people can find information, if that can happen. Can that happen? Okay, it can. Great. So what I've done is basically the idea was that let's, of course, bring mediators from around the world together. So that all started, about more than 3 years back. And then I have this YouTube channel on which I've put out a lot of information. So what I'll do is I'll take you through you find information on mediatorvikram.com. So the World Mediation Circle is the larger whole, and I'll take you through that. This is something which is coming up on tomorrow, which is the launch of the Turkey Mediation Circle. So you'll find information about connecting and everything here. So what is the World Mediation Circle? I put out a little definition of mediation also, because I keep saying that mediation is like the blind man and the elephant. Everyone looks at it differently. It's practiced differently. So I said, let's put something out there. And this has been taken from the Singapore Convention, but I've added some words here because I felt the Singapore Convention removed those words because the way mediation has gone throughout the world through the court system. So voluntary and informal is not mentioned there. The assistance of a trusted person, that trusted is not mentioned there. But for me, those are important elements. So I'm creating the mediation circles to bring a moral values, principles, and ethics-based humanistic approach to dispute resolution, where heart, soul, spirituality play an important role. So that's the way I look at mediation. That's the way I want to create mediation. Now, take it forward. But the thing was that, what will the mediation circles do? They'll help people in resolving their disputes in an amicable and collaborative manner, and attempt to heal and strengthen relationship, which we all, I think all of us want that to happen. And they're safe spaces for conversations, dialogue, collaboration, and consensus building without activism or advocacy. So I'm sure activism, advocacy have their place, but this is a space which I felt wasn't available to a lot of people, and this is not something which is happening only at the global level. So this is being created, they are going to be created in schools, colleges, organizations, and communities, and also issue-based, which I'll take you through some of these circles that I've created already. So I'm asking people to come in as mediators. If you have the mediator mindset and people can trust you to assist them in resolving their disputes. Important for me has always been that you don't need that special qualification, training, or experience, certifications, and all. You need a mediator mindset. And I think we've gone wrong in relation to mediation and putting out this, we'll create mediators. I just feel today with artificial intelligence, I think machines can do a better job if you have to program people. So I just feel that we need to bring out the right people. And for me, this is a grassroots movement. So when you bring these people out, it's a long-term process. I'm not saying this is happening today. If it takes 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But conflicts around the world have been there all throughout. So it's not something that we find areas coming up. First, you highlight another one. Today, we highlight another one. This will keep happening. But in terms of getting to the root of the issue is, can we bring out the right people in communities, families, and of course, schools, colleges, and all are important. So bring those people out, peacemakers, to bring people together. Bring out those people who are already out there, who have the mindset, who are already doing all this work. And of course, participants, people who want to resolve issues in a collaborative manner. So this is where the World Mediation Circle comes in. And I'll take you through some of the circles which have been launched and what's coming up. And then you can find all the details here in terms of circles. Then now on my YouTube channel, there are more than 675 videos on various topics in relation to mediation, because I felt we needed to highlight certain areas. So it started off with mediation in our culture and traditions, saying that people might not be familiar with the word, but they're familiar with the process. So let's connect them to the process, which they are already familiar with. So that's what mediation in our culture and traditions. Then heart, soul, spirituality for me has been always an important aspect. Spirituality removed from religion, spirituality. So there was a symposium on heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation. As I said, colonization has had a major effect on dispute resolution, because the colonizer gave us this structure, these courts. So the mindset has been created around that, being the lawyers and courts are places you go when you have disputes. So that conditioning of the mind, we have to change that. So there was a symposium on colonization, decolonization, and mediation. Then we have the indigenous peoples, which there is a base in relation to mediation out there. Let's bring that out. So there was a symposium on indigenous peoples and mediation, then of philosophy and mediation, language and mediation, all that has happened. So you'll find details on these various headings for 2023, 22, 21. But important is Ken Cloak was here. I think he started off this session. I wasn't here, but he started off. So what you'll do is you'll find one section only on the events that he has come. Because I just feel that he's given us so much time. That's, I think, there are 29 plus sessions that he's been on. So please go there, at least watch these. There'll be about maybe 30, 35, 40 hours of content. But please watch this, because he's like, I call him the grand old man of mediation in the world. So you have all this information, you have the YouTube links here, you can watch whatever he's come on. So that's a lot of information here. Please go have a look at it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through the circles, and what you people please participate if you want to. It's always nice to have more people come in. And let's get down to the ground and work. Now, there's been lots of discussions that, like I said, there's enough content out there. Now we have to work on the ground. So that's what I feel that all of you should participate in. Create circles in schools, colleges, everywhere. So this is, of course, the larger World Mediation Circle. Then we have every country is having one, so we'll have one. So India.
We don't hear you, Vikram. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I had muted myself. So we have the Indigenous Peoples Mediation Circle. Then Michael Lang was here. We've created this International Reflective Practice Circle. So we have reflective practice groups, part of every circle also. And of course, in general, reflective practice groups will come up, people can come in, and he has already spoken about what the idea is, that people come and share their experiences and whatever. So then we have the International Commercial Mediation Circle launched on the day the Singapore Convention came into force, which is 12th September. Then the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, each of those goals will create a circle there. And the goal number 17 in relation to collaboration, I just feel mediators and mediation has a major role to play there. So if we do all that, then the World Refugee Mediation Circle again can launch that. Then we have the International Organizational Mediation Circle. Like every organization, like every community, every family, every school, college should have a mediator out there. Find those people who have the mindset. Same thing with every organization, because we try to create a culture of mediation, and the culture starts for me at the grassroots level. So let people experience at the first stage, and from there, then you actually, once you've experienced it, you look at that as the option. And like I said, colonization definitely has affected those things. So okay, so family mediation circle. And this is a game that Massimiliano has created. He's based in Italy, just for people to experience mediation. So, or just resolution, so call it the resolution game. And again, you'll find all the YouTube videos of college mediation circle, school mediation circle, environmental, climate change, natural disaster, sustainability. And then we launched the Israel-Palestine mediation circle, and of course, Mohammed was there. And again, what Mohit just said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So this was the theme for that launch. And now the gatherings for each circle continue. So I'll take you through what happened after that. And idea is to get the various points of view from around the world. So Barbados, okay. Then this is a college in Delhi, in India. They've launched now they call it Sule because they connect with that word. And I've always said that, look, we're not married to the word mediation. So they'll feel that process, they call it Sule. So it's the Jamia Hamdard is a university. Jamia means university. So Jamia Hamdard Sule circle. So these college students, of course, the law students took it up, but of course, the entire university is getting involved there. So that. Then with artificial intelligence, which I just spoke about, the important thing is that we today have a space which everyone in the world has access to, which is artificial intelligence, various platforms, ChatGPT, Google Bard, and various others coming up. I'm telling people that you have access to something, make it your first responder. Talk to it like you talk to a person, and tell that artificial intelligence to be your mediator. So you have access to that, because I've always had this issue on certifications, training, and everything, that you want to program people, show empathy this way. Look, feel it. Compassion, empathy are those things that people feel. The human touch. Yeah.
Vikram, I don't want to stop you, but please, 2 minutes.
I'm done. 1 minute. This is one. So we did this on 12th December, which was gathering number 1. And then this is get together that I have of the circle. And this is the Turkey one coming up. And this is what we're doing on 20th December. Please, all of you are welcome to join. You'll find a link to the form on my website. Please fill it up and just join this gathering, which is coming up. And then we have the Ecuador Mediation Circle next year. This is 12th January. And then my YouTube channel celebration on 17th January. And I think, look, I like to talk about this, Mohammed, because everything else you people must have discussed. And you know, I don't, at this formal gatherings and all, I really don't understand. Tina also is there. It's a nice, for me, it's the living room conversation. So that's me. That's the work I do. Please get involved. It's always, like I said, nice for everyone to come. And Jeffrey, we would like you to come for the gathering on the 28th. You can talk about your experience, and everyone else is welcome. So shukran and
shukran. Thank you, Vikram. And because of that, we all love also to be with you in your circles. It's our first experience. In fact, we didn't do it before, but we are very happy. We are very honored to have all these mediators and peacemakers from all over the world, and a lot of people that are spent 3 hours non-stop listening to us. It was really great for us. We are very happy. To be honest, we heard a lot of voices and we listened to a lot of opinions. Some of it we love it, some of it we respect it, some of it we disagree with it, but we listen. And this is one of the things that make us as mediators in a place to hear others and to listen to others and to try to understand their point of view. Doesn't mean that we are agreeing with everything, but it means that we are not disagree on personal issues. We are maybe disagree with opinions, and we let everybody talk in from his perspective, from his experience. This is one of the lessons that we learned today. I believe this is something يعني will stay with us in mind. All these professionals from all over the world. We want to leave the panel for 15 minutes for anybody who want to talk, especially from the people with us that they didn't talk. Taking the issue that our translator is very tired. I'm very sorry that really we should in this circumstances bring 2 or 3 to continue working with us. For one, Manar, I'm sorry. Really, I'm really sorry. And I understand the situation that you are there. And I don't know if Ramzi can help us with that. I don't know. But really, Manar, we are all sorry. We make it hard for you tonight. So I'll keep it open for anybody who want to put any idea, anything he would like to say. Tina, I just want to say happy birthday. We wish you all the best in your life. So floor is yours. Anyone who want to share anything?
أستاذ محمد، يكون من دواعي شرفي وسروري إني أدعم زميلتي منار، بس يكون ترجمة يمكن تعاقبية بدل ما تكون فورية عشان ما نضيع وقت في السيت اب. اللي يناسبكم.
I think so. You can tell our audience your idea, so we can say to Manar, thank you Manar, شكرا.
نتبادل، كل واحد ياخذ دور. هيك أضبط. So ladies and gentlemen, just for your information, to relieve the stress on the interpreter, whether myself or Manar for that matter, we're going to take it in turns. The interpreting from me will be consecutive rather than simultaneous. So bear with us. Please be understanding that simultaneous interpreting is extremely exhausting, and it is feasible if you just give the interpreter a rest from time to time, usually 10-15 minutes in alternation. See how it goes. Okay, let's kick it off. لك رئاسة جلسة المعتاد الأستاذ محمد عشان تحدد مين المحدث الأول.
We have عبد العزيز. سيد عبد العزيز تفضل. ونحاول قد ما نقدر مداخلات سريعة يعني إن أمكن. بليز عبد العزيز.
أقول قصيرة وليس سريعة أرجوك.
السلام عليكم. لقد أحرجتني الأخ محمد حديش. الشكر الجزيل لك لأنك أنت قمت بمهام جيد خلال هذا المؤتمر، وكذلك الأخت منار المترجمة الفذة. وأقول أولا الشكر الجزيل لجميع المتدخلين، الإخوان الدكتور لاميا والدكتورة ألان بروس، وكلمة الدكتور كذلك كتبة والدكتور ميكايل لينك والأستاذ المحامي ربيع الدكتور جوفري كوري، كلمة كذلك الأستاذ تيسير محمد وفرانسيس أوجوك ورامسيس بروسيل. يعني عدد كبير من التجارب التي قاموا بإسرادها لنا في هذا المؤتمر القيم. وأحيي جميع الإخوة المتواجدين بهذا المجمع الكريم وأقول لهم سلام الله على كل أحبتي في الله. أرحب بكل من يعلو بصياغة كلامه في وساطة وكل من يحمل لواء الوساطة والتحكيم دون غبار، وأنشد أهل السلام والسلم في كل شبر من عالمنا، وأحيي كذلك أهل المركز للوساطة والتحكيم بالإجماع. وما أريد أن أفسره للإخوة الوسطاء والكرام أنني قد سأقول في معنى السلام شعر بيت: قد يعتلي ظهر الجياد ذباب ويقود أسراب الصقور غراب. ففي معنى فشل السلام للوساطة: ويسود رجاف في محفل قومه وعليه من حلل النفاق ثيابه. وفيما يخص الصيغة التنفيذية للأحكام الوساطة
أستاذ عبد العزيز،
نعم
في there is a translation شوي
على كل حال يستحيل ترجمة القصائد الشعرية، فستكون هناك ترجمة لمجمل المعنى،
سأعيد البيت.
لن تكون هناك ترجمة لكل بيت من القصيدة.
The translator said that it's not easy مش سهل عليه يعمل ترجمة للبيت الشعري، مش سهل.
معليش. قد يعتلي ظهر الجياد ذباب، يعني في معنى السلام، ويقود أسراب الصقور غراب، ويسود رجاف في محفل قومه وعليه من حلل النفاق ثياب، بالنسبة للصيغة في التنفيذ. وترى الأسافل قد تعالى مجدهم، والحر يعزل ما لديه صحاب، يعني نحن الوسطاء، لكن ما يدمي الفؤاد مرارة أسود تنبح فوقهن كلاب. هذا ما أريد أن أوضح. والسؤال المطروح هو كالتالي: لقد حيرني طوال مهامي في الوساطة والتحكيم للوصول إلى للمبتغى هو كالتالي: من سيحمي دعاة الوساطة والتحكيم لنيل السلام والفوز بالأحكام دون إبطالها أثناء ممارسة مهامهم؟ فمن المعلوم أن القضاء العمومي كل أفراده محميون بالقانون. ولهذا أقول كيف سينشد السلام في السلم العالمي ونحن كواسطين ومحكمين لسنا محميين خلال ممارستنا لمهام الوساطة والتحكيم؟ كيف سنحصل على نتائج في تحرير الأحكام وهي مقرونة بالصيغة التنفيذية للمحاكم العمومية المختصة؟ يجب إنشاء قوانين خاصة ومعترف بها لدى جميع الدول المشاركة في الوساطة والتحكيم لحماية أولاً الوسطاء والمحكمين أثناء الممارسة ودون ضغوطات من الغير. وتحياتي لكم جميعا، أحييكم جميعا.
شكرا جزيلا.
السلام عليكم.
والآن الترجمة باختصار. Now a very brief translation. So the gentleman just now, Mr. Abdulaziz Wahia, started by giving his thanks, first of all, to the organizers of this meeting, to the speakers, and also to the interpreters. Then extended his greetings to all participants in the field of mediation. He expressed through a wonderful poem, which I have to apologize for not giving a proper poetic translation of it. I will summarize the whole poem in one sentence, which is to say that basically the only hope that there is for violent conflict is for the role of mediation. That is the only hope there is for the proper resolution of violent conflict. And now the question, which I'm going to translate in a bit more detail, is, in the case of arbitration or legal action of some sort attached to a particular conflict, how do you, on the one hand, separate between the action of mediation versus the attempt to achieve victory in the legal process? How do you also protect the mediators from the consequences of the implementation of judicial decisions? And how do you ensure the implementation of judicial decisions?
شكرا Ramzi. Thank you for the translation. I don't think that we have a lot of time to answer questions more than maybe to hear some inputs from our colleagues and people who participate, or even the speakers if they want to add anything in the last 10 minutes, let's say.
So now Manar is going to do the interpreting, okay?
Otherwise, we will give my colleague Faten the last speech to finalize. Yeah, please, رمزي.
لا الترجمة الآن منار هتقوم بها، بناخدها بالدور المتبادل.
Okay. Dr. Nita.
I am not going to turn my camera on, but I'll just say this to the last question. As a mediator or a conflict resolution specialist, I am not an advocate for a judicial settlement, because it really goes against the principles of mediation, because there's always a winner or a loser. And in international context, going to a judicial settlement, one of the things that we can see is that when the powerful win a court case in an international context, a settlement is abided by. But when the weak win a court case or a judicial settlement, then the settlement does not need to be implemented, and there is no enforcement mechanism in the international sphere to make it enforced. So it makes some of these judicial settlements in the ICJ very weak, because there's no enforcement mechanism. And that in itself should say that mediation might be a better option, because it's a mutually agreed outcome.
Thank you, Dr. Nita. Anybody, did you? I didn't recognize if you did the translation or not. Manar, did you translate it? Anyways, أي مداخلات من أي حدا؟ في حدا بيحب يضيف؟ فاتن، شو رأيك نختم؟ But let me wish everybody here Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. From my side as Palestinian, as somebody who's living in a city, it continues to be under occupation. It started in 1967. I born in 1970, and all my life I spent under occupation. I wish that I will see the day of freedom, the day of peace, the recognition of my dream to have a state, a Palestinian state, to live side by side with the Israeli state under the what we agreed on, the two-state solution. I don't care even sometimes about, is it two-state solution, is it one-state solution, doesn't matter. The main important thing for me is to put an end for the occupation, and to give us the opportunity to build our future by ourselves. I wish also that the end of the year will bring the end of the war in Gaza. We hope that we will see very soon a ceasefire, and all of this will stop as soon as possible. It's not easy. It's a disaster, and it's small. Faten, please.
شكرا محمد، وشكرا لكل محاضرينا اليوم في هذا اللقاء المميز. ما أحوجنا إلى السلام؟ سلام داخلي، وسلام على مستوى علاقاتنا كأفراد، وعلاقات الدول ببعضها على مستوى المنظمات وجميع الدول في العالم. كان اليوم لقاء رائعا تميز بالتنوع والثراء والاختلاف. لقد تجمعنا فيه وسطاء من جميع أنحاء العالم. تحدثنا وتناولنا عدة مواضيع تمحورت حول الوساطة، وساطة السلام. ولن اختلفت المواضيع، ولكن تبقى كلها مهمة، وأضافت حجرة إلى البناء، بناء السلام، بناء الوساطة. ولعل ما علق بذهني صورة الفيروس، فيروس العنف، وهي لها دلالات ومعاني كثيرة. لأن حلقة الانتقام لا نهاية لها، وكلما قطعنا أو اجتثثنا وقمنا باستعمال الاجتثاث سيثبت التاريخ أو أثبت أيضا التاريخ أن ليس هذا هو الحل. العنف ليس الحل، وإنما نشر السلام وثقافة السلام التي يجب أن تكون لا فقط عملية بروسيس، وإنما منهج حياة وعقلية لنبني يدا بيد بشرية بعيدة عن المصالح الضيقة والعنف. العنف اللامحدود، وقد بيّنت نقاشاتنا وعروضنا اليوم وكذلك خبراتنا التي تبادلناها في هذا اليوم الرابع من ملتقى الوسائل البديلة أن ذلك ليس بمستحيل ولا بعزيز على البشرية، وإنما فقط يستوجب إرادة واستراتيجية وإيمانا بأن إرساء وبناء السلام الدائم يمر ضرورة عبر التحاور والاعتراف وخلق بيئة آمنة لتنفيذ ذلك. سلام للجميع. شكرا لكم على قبول دعوة أكت. شكرا لكل الفريق العامل في أكت، فريق اللجنة العلمية، هبة ذقان، بسام غزال، مي أبو غزالة، الأستاذ محمد هادية، الأستاذة الدكتورة دكتورتنا عفوا
ديانا
وكل الفريق العامل في المؤسسة،
نعم.
وكذلك بيرم وطارق أيضا، كل
ومحمد عطية،
محمد عطية، كل من ساهم في إنجاح هذا المؤتمر الذي امتد على
طارق
طبعا
all team, all our colleagues,
كل جنود الخف.
from and Fatin from Tunisia, Tariq from Hebron, Hiba and Diana and Biram from Nablus, May from Jerusalem, everybody.
ولك أيضا أستاذ محمد هادي على كل هذا العطاء، وعلى يعني استراتيجية أكت التي تبنيها يعني حجرة بحجرة لوضع بصمة أكت في نشر ثقافة الوسائل البديلة والوساطة، واليوم أصبحنا نتحدث عن وساطة السلام. شكرا لكل من حضر وكل من ساهم في إنجاح هذا المؤتمر، ولو بكلمة، ولو بنقاش، ولو من إنصاتي إلينا. شكرا.
Thank you. We hope we will see you later, but let me tell you something before. I'm going with Michael's suggestion. We will make it real. I will continue contact with as we agreed, Jeffrey also. We will continue working together. I'm very honored, very proud with this team. We will continue working together. We have the plan. We will share it with you for the beginning of next year. Everywhere you are, we love you all. We respect you all. We are honored that you are with us all from everywhere. Thank you.
عيد مجيد سعيد للجميع، ولي يعني كل أصدقائنا من عالم أجمع. شكرا.